Call this meeting to order. Confirmation of the agenda that the Council Township of North Huron accept the agenda for the March 2nd, 2020 council meeting as presented. Do I have a mover? I have Christopher, I have Rick. All in favor? Carries. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we'll move right along. Public comments. Opportunity for the member of the public to speak to any item of business on the agenda. You have 2 minutes per person. Seeing none, we shall continue to move on. Consent agenda. That the Council Township of North Huron hereby adopt consent agenda items 5.1.1 to 5.1.2. And further, the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives consent items 5.1.3 to 5.3.1 for information. Do I have a mover? I have Anita, seconder. Paul, would anybody like to pull anything out, talk about it? Anita, go ahead.
5.2.2 and 5.2.3, the reports from the clerk and the recreation department. I really appreciate those reports. It gives the community a good sense of what's happening here and in the rec center and everything behind the scenes, that there is a lot of work being done that people don't notice all the time. And I really appreciate those reports.
Thank you very kindly. Anyone else? Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, in regards to 5.2.2 and the clerks, that ATV bylaw research, is that going towards a rather doing the whole of North Huron?
Through your workshop.
Yep.
So the direction provided at the February 16th meeting, I believe, was that staff would investigate all of North Huron as it relates to the ATVs.
Thank you, I'm just making sure.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Public meetings and hearings. We'd like to have David Sparling, the chair of the Blythe BIA, come up and talk about the Blythe Parking Initiative. David, it's your turn.
Thank you for having me. Would I be correct to assume the presentation is on here? Good, because I had a black screen of death moment with my laptop on Thursday. And my file for this is in there somewhere, but I don't know where Geek Squad put it at the moment, so.
I don't feel so lonely now because mine went down too. Bad week.
Well, thank you for having us. 20-second summary and then we'll sort of get into the meat of it. Good news for the village of Blythe is that Blythe Festival continues to grow its season, continues to grow the number of people coming to the shows, all of which is good news for the VIA, good news for the community. Historically and long-running challenge concerns about parking availability, safe parking in Blythe, and the BIA last fall as part of sort of looking forward with the festival continuing to grow. Put it out to our membership, what do we need to look at, what do we need to do? And over the next series of meetings in several months, we actually came to a consensus, a conclusion on all parking points you're going to see tonight, which was pretty neat. I'd like to give a shout out to Sean and Stu from North Huron. They helped us understand stuff beyond just the conceptual, but actually were very helpful in putting into layman's terms what's really going on, what we could do, what made sense and what didn't. So do appreciate the North Huron staff participation with this. So first thing that comes up is there's always we need short-term parking in Blythe. Heard that for a number of years. At some of the open house meetings you may have heard that as well. In Blythe, there are now 7 90-minute parking spaces, and they are 90 minutes from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Beside the pharmacy. As well beside the pharmacy, there are 2 accessible parking spaces. Used to be 1, but they're now 2, properly marked and signed. And although those are privately held, those are open for public use. The other thing that came out of this is that we've got merchants who are concerned about Main Street parking. And unfortunately and ironically, some of those same merchants at times will park in front of someone else's store with their personal vehicle. So we've been pushing and encouraging our membership, if you've got a personal vehicle for your store or your staff, try and park in the alley behind it. If you do need to park on the main street for whatever reason, we'd encourage you to park in front of your own store instead of someone else's, just out of professional courtesy. So that's sort of the quick parking one. As part of this, we talked at the Blythe Festival, which is one of the larger users of parking spaces, and we also spoke with Cowbell. In terms of the Blythe Festival, one of the things that we discussed and looked at is their drop-off and emergency area in front of the festival. Right now, what happens is whenever there's a show, they'll wheel out signs that says no parking, etc. However, on multiple times last year, with construction going on the building next door, festival staff were scrambling to find who owns the white pickup truck, who's got the van parked in our spots, who's got a play on in the middle of the day for school children, and these vehicles are parked in our emergency area. It was also noted that not necessarily even when major shows are on, but when events are on, there's still quite possibly a need for emergency vehicle access in front of their building. So one of the things that the BIA agreed to would be permanently designating the parking spaces in front of the theater, the Blythe Memorial Hall, strictly for drop-off and for emergency vehicles only. So if you've got someone with physical limitations, you want to drop off in front of the theater and then go park, great. Aside from that, every hour of every day those spaces would be accessible for emergency vehicles should they be needed. With the crosswalk, and the graphics are sort of approximate, there's nothing 100% on that, but with the crosswalk being put in, we thought there might be an opportunity to tie this in with that construction in some manner or some way when they're at it, and just permanently designate these parking spaces. The next thing is when you look at some of the side streets around the Blythe Festival, when shows are on, people tend to park on both sides of the streets. When you park on both sides of the streets, it's very tight for cars to get down. Personally, my pickup truck got hit by a hay baler 2 years ago and it's parked on the side of the street. And it just gets congested. So the recommendation that the Blythe BIA agreed upon would be that you make parking available on one side of the streets only, and that these parking spaces be painted on so that people don't block laneways or crowd into laneways, block fire hydrants and so forth. And that would be on the two streets on the west side of the Blythe Festival. The back alley behind the Blythe Festival has historically been called Ski Dunk Alley. Long story behind the name. But there are many occasions when, and certainly from the fire service, the fire sprinkler ports are in the back of the buildings. With people parking there, the fire trucks would never get down the alley. So the suggestion would be is to make the entire back alley no parking, with the exception of spots immediately beside the Legion, which would be reserved for Legion members, so that people attending the theater would not use those spots. And that would leave access for emergency vehicles should they need to get back down the alley. The next streets were along Dinsley Street. So just to give everybody a sort of a geographic sense, where you see the red arrow pointing is where the Garage Theater is for the Blythe Festival. Bunch of discussion on this slide and the perspective of North Huron and Sean and Stu was very helpful. So we'll start off with the red arrow. When the Blythe Festival is in, people are parking on the paved boulevard and then parking on the street and then parking on the other side of the street. So you have 3 rows of cars parked along the street. And it creates a little bit of confusion, certainly crowds in the street. And the Blythe Festival is increasingly using the Garage Theater for performances as well as just props and costumes. So the suggestion would be is to take the spots immediately in front of the Garage Theater and make them so that they're not used for vehicle parking. Could be bicycle parking, could be benches, could be planters, but make them more pedestrian and non-motorized vehicle friendly, so you only wind up with cars parked on one side instead of 3 deep. The parking spaces that are paved boulevard spaces by the Blythe Inn and by Orr Insurance, similar to the streets, mark out proper parking spaces on those so that people don't sort of crowd down those beyond where they should. When you look at the green area, that is where the existing public works and the old fire hall are. And there was consensus in the end that those would be best repurposed into residential lots. That ultimately becomes a council decision, but there was quite a discussion around that. But in the end, the consensus is that we need more buildings. We've got huge demand for housing, and frankly, let's make those into residential lots if we could. At the same time, when we're looking at the yellow lines by the proposed or conceptual residential lots, when Mill Street gets reconstructed, a lot of people are already parking there to go to the United Church for church services, for funerals, for other business activities. The consensus was that if Mill Street is being reconstructed, it'd be advantageous to build it in a manner such that there's appropriate parking on both sides of the street when that construction happens on that one block that's immediately past the theater. At the same time, the blue lines represent sidewalks, and when the construction happens, put in sidewalks so the pedestrians can park their car and then safely get up to the main street on both Drummond and Dinsley. And lastly, if the Mill Street construction is underway, consider the possibility of parking spots down towards Howson's Mill and the Old Mill on one side of the construction. And the one thing I want to stress is that we get that this won't happen tomorrow. It'd be lovely if this all happened by August 1st, but we understand it won't and it can't. But we like the idea of working with North Huron as they're redoing Mill Street to have this as part of the consideration. We like the idea that some of this stuff will happen over time, but there's a plan in place. Currently, there is a shortage of parking spaces in Blythe. Wonderful problem for our village to have, and many other communities would be envious if they had a parking problem. So looking at it, North Huron already maintains parking spaces around the Blythe and District Community Center, the Blythe Arena. But if you park there, there's no sidewalk for you to walk on from there to the Main Street businesses. There's no marked pedestrian path if you park your car to walk even from one end of the arena to the other, so you're walking with oncoming traffic. When we look at this, it was felt with some improved lighting, so it feels safer at night. The yellow lines you'll see would indicate a painted pedestrian cross across the street. Blue would represent sidewalks, and then a couple of four-way stops to help reduce the traffic speed. That these parking spaces suddenly become a usable infrastructure for parking in the Main Street customers and theater goers, which right now they would never access. And adjunct to that is that the BIA will be improving the blue wayfinding signs in Blythe, which don't necessarily reflect current locations of things. And we would be indicating that there's free municipal parking with arrows pointing towards the arena, and the typical green P parking is part of that cleanup of the signage. Next thing that came out when we were talking about pedestrian safety, and this is one by the age of our kids, I just didn't really register, but it made sense. So you've got community safety zone, watch for children, 30 kilometers an hour, drive slowly. And the reason why we need all those signs is if your kids go to the Lions Park in Blythe, there's actually no sidewalk to walk on to get to the Lions Park. And it was felt and suggested that if the sidewalk was completed to the Lions Park, that the safety of the kids would probably be benefited. Then if you carry down on up to where the four-way stops are, it closes out the sidewalk to the arena and the arena-based parking. The smiley face sign at the south end of Blythe. A lot of positive feedback. People like it. They think it works. I know Huron County has some statistics that would suggest it works. The BIA would love it if another one of those went into the north end of the village. So vehicles coming in from that end likewise get the please slow down message. Some of our merchants on the main street from trucks coming in from north end have their triangle TP signs actually blow over from the wind of those trucks. So we have a feeling that that's probably faster than 50 kilometers an hour when they get to the bottom of the hill. This would be something that would have to go to Huron County. And I don't know how that process works or where it goes from there, but the BIA felt that this would increase the pedestrian safety. Last summer, North Huron painted pedestrian lines on all the pedestrian crossings in Blythe. That has not been the case in the past. They've never been there before. Very well received. We get it that some of them are a little wobbly from the first time they're using the machine, but the pedestrian crossings are really well received. And the BIA would like to see if North Huron, with the permission of the County of Huron, would paint the pedestrian crossings across Queen Street, wherever there's sidewalk connecting two sides of the street. So we feel it sends a message to vehicles that yes, people could be walking here and would help with the visual optics that you should maybe slow down. And then the other one at the very north end would be where the Greenway G2G trail crosses the highway to indicate that as a pedestrian crossing. The last thing that came out is the whole lack of sidewalk to the Cowbell Tim Hortons corner. And the blue lines indicate the existing sidewalk and where those sidewalks end. And what's happening right now is people just cross the highway. Typically they're crossing actually London Road rather than cross Blythe Road because they don't want to have to come to the intersection from the Blythe Road. So they're crossing the highway as you see there. Cowbell employees, some of them prefer to walk, and they're walking, but they won't go down London Road. So they actually go up Sunward, which is the hill road, to avoid the intersection. I know Shane, who is probably arrived just in time for this to end. But Shane, they own Hotel Lux, and we have 3 Airbnb units on the main street of Blythe. And most of our customers that go to Cowbell walk because they want to be responsible and they don't want to have any impaired concerns. And we've had a few comments about the wintertime walk where they're walking down the shoulder in the wintertime, which is not ideal. And there some concerns expressed, this really can't be what you're expecting to walk on comments. Last year during the MS bike ride through Blythe, a number of riders walked out to Cowbell and they were walking down the sidewalk and they asked me to join them, so I did. And they said, well, where's the sidewalk go from here? And I said, well, it ends. and they had some comments about people that might have some alcohol then walking on the side of the road and what they thought of that. The BIA has no answer for this because this involves intersection issues. This involves county road crossing issues. Both sides of the highway are low. But what we do know is that for every one person that goes to Blythe Festival, 4 to 5 go to Cowbell. And 85% of those going to Cowbell do not come through Blythe to get there, which therefore means they don't see our main street, don't see other opportunities. And as a BIA, we're concerned that Blythe and North Huron are missing out on economic opportunities with 100 to 150,000 people literally 700 meters from Main Street, who, if they are waiting for 2 hours to go into the restaurant, don't see a sidewalk, don't feel inclined to walk to the main street down the shoulder. We're concerned that our opportunity for our main street to truly benefit from Cowbell is jeopardized by the fact that there is no sidewalk. And aside from just the walking there, it creates the optics of a connectivity from Cowbell to a community. There have been guests at Hotel Lux in Blythe didn't realize there actually was a community over the hill. They assumed that Blythe was basically about the size of Carlow, and that there was no community over the hill, and they were not aware. Came in from London, had their supper and went home, and And then asked the Hotel Lux folks, where was your hotel? And they said, well, it's on the main street of Blythe. And they said, well, where's the main street? So we put this out there not with an answer because we don't think there's an easy answer. But we put this out there because as a business community, we're genuinely concerned that we're missing out on something big. And we would look to North Huron for some direction, some assistance, some leadership, and be that a task force. I know everyone wants more committees and stuff, but this involves Huron County, Cowbells, and Central Huron. This involves North Huron. It's a concern to the merchants. We don't know how we take all this concern and this idea and manifest it into something that's a responsible and effective way to connect the town to Cowbell. But we like to partner with North Huron as a BIA and whoever else North Huron feels is appropriate, in whatever manner North Huron feels is appropriate to get to that end result. And that's pretty much an open check and open opportunity from us, because we really want to see this happen, and we need your help and need your leadership to get us there.
Thank you very much, David. I'm going to open it up to councillors' questions, comments, and concerns. Go ahead, Trevor.
So I have a question, and then I'll have a comment about the last thing. Was there a discussion at the BIA about how the emergency area and drop-off was going to be policed? In the sense of, that is a bylaw enforcement discussion, and we don't have bylaw enforcement 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So how are these parking initiatives going to be policed from a BIA perspective? Was there a discussion on that?
So we'll go back to these ones. These ones are in private property, so those are enforced by the property owner. So that mitigates those ones. In terms of this one, there was some discussion because there was a question, is there actually a bylaw in place, or under what authority does the Blythe Festival for the last 10 or 20 years put out these signs? The bottom line is the Blythe Festival currently, and I don't know how formal the manner is, but they currently enforce the parking because it's to their benefit and for their concern. I would assume that they would probably continue with that level of enforcement because it's to their best interest and for their concern that would happen. And most people, frankly, wherever they are, if you politely ask them, most people are fairly obliging.
Okay, and then the comment that I have about the sidewalk or connection between Cowbell and Tim Hortons to North Huron, that had been a discussion at the time when Cowbell was being built, and Tim Hortons was being built with Central Huron in the previous council during the cross-border services agreement discussion. Obviously, with the discussion that has to come back to the table. I completely agree with you, David, and the BIA's assessment. I think, the intention of this is that, you want to have your major economic drivers connected to the rest of your community, and that ultimately is not the case at this point. And needless to say, not even the traffic is a concern at County Road 25 and 4 without you throwing people in the mix. Now you throw people in the mix, there could be, and the potential for alcohol and a whole bunch of other things. You throw a whole bunch of other variables into the scenario where it doesn't end up well, I think, and ultimately. So, I agree with you. I think, that's a discussion that has to be had with, the BIA, Cowbell, Tim Hortons, Central Huron, North Huron, on a community table, Huron County, to sit down and say, what do we all think this is going to be, and at the end of the day, who's going to support what by either dollar or bylaw or some factor, so that we can get a sensibleness to what is ultimately not a real sensible framework in pedestrian safety at the north end the south end of Blythe. So I completely agree with you. I think that's on the, I think once we get to the point where we're having those discussions with Central Huron, other Garage to Cross Border Services, and in the same breath that we're having them with Morris Sternberry, I think those can be discussions that can be had, and Blythe, BIA, and Cowbell and them can be brought along into that discussion to see what we can do as a community group to benefit, you know, the community. Because I think ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that's the best thing we can talk about.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, through you, Reeve. Dave, I'm just wondering, do you have approximately the number of meters of sidewalk that you're envisioning with your BIA group? And
Well, we deferred that to Sean in terms of, I don't know how many meters, but how much it's gonna cost, how, and you know, because when you look at all the sidewalk, I would doubt North Huron to be able to do it all in 1 year. We get that, and then, so we deferred it back to Public Works to give some indication of what they think they could do.
Okay.
And I know they have the numbers, did the calculations, I wouldn't have those, but the Public Works have their homework on that, so they're solid on it.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Christopher.
Yeah, through you, Reeve. You've done a fine job here. You can certainly see what Blythe needs. Regarding your ski dunk alley, I'm unclear as how wide it is. Like you said, no parking, period. Is there room for one side or not? Just to help the situation.
Well, so when, there's no parking already indicated behind the Blythe Memorial Hall. People sometimes park there temporarily, but generally speaking, that's abided by. So basically what you're adding is, if you see the red square there, you would be adding no parking to the building immediately beyond that. So you're adding probably about 3 to 4 parking spots you'd be getting rid of or eliminating. As to how wide it is, as to one side or no side, aside from the entrance areas, once you start parking cars on there, especially in wintertime, I can't give you width numbers, but it gets crowded, and I'd look to Councillor McBurney as well on that. It's not a full width road, so it does get crowded even with a single car width.
Okay.
At the entrances, it's a little bit easier because it sort of goes like this. So where the red spots are, it's a little bit wider and can be accommodated. But as you go down, there's a hedge, and it just gets tight, especially with the snowfall in the winter.
Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Trev.
Reeve, the only other question I had is the one where you were talking about the 3 lane, like the parking on the boulevard,
Yep.
parking on the road, and the parking on the other side.
Yep.
If the boulevard was marked parking, like physical lines on the boulevard that would indicate parking,
Yeah.
does the BIA think that then people would then park on the road beside it? They would still consistently park on the road beside it, even if it was, because right now it's not marked as parking.
Yeah.
It's just a boulevard,
Yeah.
right? So, like, I don't know, like, I'm just, like, in my mind, if I'm on Boulevard and it's marked as parking,
Yep.
no different than downtown Main Street down here, it's marked as parking. I don't foresee anybody parking right beside it and
Trev,
say,
there was one day, and my office is just literally down the street from this. There was one day when there were 4 cars wide. It was a popular matinee, and there were 2 cars on each side. So if you put the green space there and then put the parking on the street, it eliminates any chance of that, and you still wind up with the same number of parking spots. But I don't know why people would want to park 4 wide there, but that was the record day.
so let me, as I'm reading this, you're wanting the green
Yes.
as parking?
No, wanting the green as pedestrian space. So if you walk out from a show in the garage theater, there's somewhere to loiter out front,
Okay.
and at the same time it eliminates the double parking.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, So I'm gonna turn to Sean, and I'm gonna say I hear a couple of things tonight, and I'm not sure if we need a motion or we can just ask staff to look into it. The sidewalks, I think we should do on a phased basis, and I think we could start them anytime, because we're not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars if we phase it in properly. Starting with in front of the Lions Club would be the first place I would presume you'd wanna start. Could you look into that for us? With the, and I already talked to the county about the roundabout, and if that's quite a ways off, or maybe not possible because of the pricing. With the Main Street itself, anything that goes on with the Main Street, I believe as county has to be involved in it. And the sidewalks out to the far end and the roundabout. Could we start having conversations with the county staff about that? And if you want to, I'll be part of the conversation. And start to see, as Trevor said, let's get some pricing on this. And then let's come up with timelines and how we can do this, because I totally agree with you. You guys are cut off, and the cowbell is something that brings a lot of people to this area. So go ahead, Sean.
Yes, thank you, Reeve. So I did have some preliminary discussion with Public Works at the county level. So they're certainly aware that this initiative is underway. We talked about a number of aspects of the report. Also, you'll recall in our budget deliberations, there was some money earmarked for sidewalk in the sidewalk initiative in Blythe, which stemmed from the concept level of this report. So we put it in there as a placeholder, which would give us as you said, it would be a phased approach. It would give us a good, healthy start this year.
So you determine where you're gonna do that, or are you gonna have conversations with David and just come up to a consensus where the best is, or you already know that?
We would suggest, if, really the driver here is to start getting theater patrons parking at the Civic Center. So we would focus on the connecting link between, first off, prepping that parking lot to make it better lit and better marked, and then basically developing that connecting link of sidewalks to get them over there.
Okay.
So that would, to us, that would be a really strong start off of the blocks.
Okay. So again, since you folks are working together, and a fantastic presentation, by the way. We're working together on this. We're going to start this year by the sounds of it, because we did put sidewalks in for budget. And we should continue to do so, because I can't stress enough that North Huron will never be able to do 50 miles of anything. So let's start with a quarter of a mile if it has to be, and never stop. Just keep building. So if we could do that, and then sit down with who needs to be at the table with the county and start talking about the situation out at the cowbell. I have talked to them. Actually, the very day they had that lit up stop sign he said, when you're going home today, Bernie says, just check out the new stop sign. So anyway, let's have conversations and see if we come up with that. And further to that, as Trevor said, then we're going to get into conversation with Central Huron, because as everybody knows, I'm kind of planning on putting a pretty big building out there if I get my way, so we'll need sidewalks down to the Main Street. That's called the county building, boys. Still working on that. So if that, is that good with everybody if we start at that? Do we need a motion for that, or just that's business as usual?
Through your worship, so if Sean's already incorporated it in the draft budget, then the direction would come through the passing of the budget.
Okay.
But if there is direction that's council wants to provide to staff beyond that, then I would suggest a motion be made.
Wonder if we can have a motion to come up with a timeline on it too, 6 months, Sean, and just before I go to Kevin, without pushing you, can we get a timeline on it? Cause I always find in life, if I don't put a timeline on it, 2 years goes by instead of 6 months. And again, be careful, graceful to yourself, because we all know you run into stumbling things.
Now, this is a timeline for the construction of the sidewalk?
No, you guys can do that, just a timeline on how we're gonna improve after this year. Like, so can you say to us that every year we could do this if we put it in the budget, and we will achieve that goal and eventually?
We can work, I can work with the BIA, we can come up with a phased, kind of a multi-year approach to this in fairly short order. About 3 months kind of thing, I think would be
3 months?
appropriate.
Okay, great. Let's put it for 3 months and see how far we've got and what's going on. Do we need a motion for that?
I can read what I have drafted.
Okay. Just before we do that, Kevin had wanted to talk.
Yeah, before we closed up the session on this initiative, the painting of parking spaces on North Huron property, since we have a painting machine, for line painting machine, that could be an initiative that could be scheduled in to do quite quickly over the summer, as we're out painting other lines. I think that's something we could move forward to that wouldn't be very, as cost initiative as the other sidewalks and stuff that we would have to plan and do much more due diligence on. I think that would be one form of moving forward on this proposal by David that we could do quite within our reach that we have right now.
Go ahead, Sean.
Yes, as Councillor Faulkner pointed out, we definitely can take on the painting piece this year. That's man hours and availability. So I have no concern about applying that. The one question I do have, and this may call for some sort of resolution or instruction from council, if you're going to adopt single-sided parking on some of these streets, by extension, I have to put no parking signs up, and I'm not going to go and do that without direction of council, otherwise your phones are gonna ring.
So that could come back before council when you've decided where you'd like to put them and not, and for a motion, I'm gonna presume?
Absolutely.
Motion I have here, I think through your worship, I think
Yep.
what Sean's talking about would almost come back with this multi-year plan. So the motion I have right now is that the council of the Township of North Huron hereby directs staff to prepare a multi-year plan to address the parking concerns in Blythe in collaboration with the Blythe BIA for council's consideration by June of 2020.
That was just parking, it should be sidewalks and stuff.
Okay. Parking and sidewalk concerns.
Do I have a mover? Trevor?
So I'll move it, but I just have a comment about it too. Get a second
Yep.
here first.
Oh, sorry. Who'd like to second it? Chris? No, you can, my friend.
In that, we're repurposing a bylaw that would indicate which roads have no parking signs on. So that would come back as a bylaw to us to amend. No different than the bylaw that we did in Wingham for the roads and the stoplights and the stop signs and stuff we did. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
That you drafted out,
Yep. Okay. That's fine. Yep.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I call it. All in favor? Carries. Any other questions or comments? Last chance. David, thank you very kindly for coming out. We hope that helps your efforts.
And I'd like to introduce my vice chair.
Oh,
I
look,
remember
you
I
showed
said
up.
you show up just as it was. Anyway, so
I
Shane
made
is
really good time.
Shane is the vice chair and has been quite helpful and been at all the meetings as we work through this as well. So we'd like to acknowledge his presence here.
Friendly.
Thanks for
Thank
coming
you.
out.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, guys.
I could be here to help.
6.2, Christine Hoffman, Housing Service Manager, Chris Watson, Economic Development Officer, and Monica Walker Bolton, Planner. The Huron County status and initiatives of housing.
Oh, there's a chairman coming. Yep. Well, thank you very much, Reed Bailey. Good evening, Council. I would like to invite my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Christine Hoffman, Manager of Housing Services with the County of Huron.
Chris Watson. Yeah, Economic Development Officer with the county, and thank you so much for having us.
And I'm representing Planning and Development. So the presentation that we have for you tonight is the status and initiatives of housing. So I'm going to hand the presentation over to Chris to begin.
Wonderful, thank you so much, Monica, and just thank you again, Council and your worship, for having us tonight. I'm going to spend the first few slides just going over the problem. I'm not going to dwell a whole lot on that because I have a feeling that this council has a very good idea of the housing situation right now. But I'll share a few stats with you before we move on. Just before I do that, though, I just wanted to briefly go over a couple of definitions here. So over the course of the presentation, you'll hear us refer to market housing, attainable housing, and affordable housing. And I just want to talk about the differences between those three terms. So if you hear us referring referring to market housing, what we're talking about here is essentially housing that any individual could buy on the open housing market at any price, and generally without any public support or subsidization. When we talk about attainable housing, that's sort of looking at it from the perspective of the buyer. So attainable housing for me may be different from attainable housing from somebody else, but it's essentially what an individual feels that they could afford based on their own wage. And affordable housing, what we're talking about is a defined term that is referring to any housing that costs less than 30% of a household's before tax income. So just ask you to keep those definitions in mind as we go through here. So just to take you back, the population and the number of dwellings in Huron County, you'll see the population hasn't changed a whole lot. We've been hovering at that level just below 60,000 people since 2006. The number of dwellings has gone up slightly, and that's primarily due to the average household size shrinking. So fewer people per household, number of people stayed the same, but we've seen the dwellings go up just slightly. When we look at what those dwellings comprise, so the types of housing within the county currently, you'll see that the two things I'm going to just focus on here are the orange line, which you'll see that big jump in the number of condominiums. Now, I'll just caution you, the absolute number is pretty low. We're still looking at less than 200, but it is a type of housing that's becoming more popular, so just draw your attention to that. As well as the blue line up at the top. And this refers to single-family detached housing, and this is obviously the majority of housing within the county currently. Next, I want to share with you just the trends of housing sales over the last 10 years or so. You'll see that prior to, from 2007 leading into 2009 and 2011, we went through the Great Recession. We saw with that the economy slowing, the demand for housing went down. Number of housing sales went down. As things picked up, number of sales went up until they peaked in 2015 for 3+ bedroom homes, and a little bit later with bungalows in 2017, followed by a fairly precipitous drop. Now, that fairly precipitous drop, we have been made clear to us in no uncertain terms from our friends in the real estate community that that was not due to a lack of demand, but a lack of supply. So, breaking that apart, we took a little closer look at some of that data after the downturn. So this graph, what it does is it breaks apart listings. So listings of homes that sold and listings that were taken off the market because they didn't sell. So back in 2012, we saw that about 50% of the houses, so half the homes that were listed sold, the other half didn't. They were taken off the market for whatever reason. We move fast forward to 2017, where it's closer to 85% of the homes that are selling and only about 15% that aren't. So a house that gets on the market tends to sell. Looking a little closer at those homes that did sell, the average number of days on the market back in 2014 peaked at about just over 4 months. Fast forward to today, we're less than 2 months on the market. Again, skipping back to the homes that are selling and the homes that aren't selling, what we're seeing is back in 2012, the difference in price between homes that sold and homes that were not was, within about 100,000 of each other, compared to today, where the overwhelming majority of homes that aren't selling are priced extremely high. So if your home is around that 300,000 level, the majority of those are selling, whereas the ones that aren't tend to be very high priced. Now, how have home prices compared with incomes? So we look back at 2006, we see that we're about 100,000 off our average household income. Today, we're looking at closer to 200,000, and the number is growing. So what this is telling us is that the decreased number of homes that we have listed and the dramatically increased average home price, demand is far higher than supply. And that increase in home prices means that more and more Huron County residents are priced out of the housing market. Again, this is probably not a surprise to most of the people around the table here. We commissioned a report just to take a look at, what does a wage or a working wage get you in Huron County right now? So we looked at 6 different scenarios, ranging from, at the low level, a single earner making $15 an hour. Looked at a range of scenarios all the way up to 2 earners making $25 an hour, and took a look at what housing would be available to you. So again, that number that you see on the right is based on that affordability, that 30% affordability threshold. So 30% of pre-tax income. Here's what we found. Essentially, to afford a 1-bedroom apartment, you needed to get into that scenario 2, so making $25 an hour as a single earner. And 2-bedroom apartments didn't get affordable until you were up to that 4 scenario, so much higher on the wage bracket. When we look at purchasing, so being able to afford a mortgage, we found that only at the highest level could an individual afford the range of housing between a single-family detached and an apartment. And affording to purchase anything wasn't possible until you were into that dual income scenario, scenario 4. So from there, again, I don't think that's too shocking news for most of the people around the table here tonight. Then what are we doing about it? County Council earlier in the year gave us direction to move forward with 7 different initiatives amongst our 3 departments that we're going to talk about right now. So I'm going to pass it over to Monica, who's going to talk about the planning initiatives.
Thank you, Chris. So for planning and development, there's 3 components to the 7-point plan. The first is the residential intensification guidelines. So what this guideline is looking at is how do we take the existing land base that we have available for residential, the existing investment that we have in infrastructure, and try to find ways to provide more housing within that space. So intensification means increasing density within the residential zones. So the tool is being developed to help address the issues that commonly arise during the planning applications associated with zone change to higher density. And the guidelines will show the proponents of the development how they can have insight into how the project could be designed better in order to successfully incorporate into the neighborhood. So that's the residential intensification guidelines. The second part of our 3 prongs would be the planning document review. So a review of every official plan and zoning bylaw in Huron County to ensure that the standards that are in the zoning bylaws and official plans are helping to achieve the housing needs and to promote an easier approach for the developer that's trying to create more density, and at the same time as cutting the number of planning applications that are needed to achieve higher density, to provide that guidance to ensure that it is incorporated into the community in a harmonious way. And thirdly, residential pre-zoning. So what this would involve is taking a look at each of the major towns within each of our municipalities. So for North Huron, we're looking at Blythe, Belgrave, and Wingham, and identifying parcels within those communities that are already designated for residential, but that would be a suitable size to pre-zone for a higher density residential, like an R3 residential, so that when a developer comes to want to build in those areas, they already have proceeded past one of the major stumbling blocks that tends to generate some objections from neighbors and the public, that we, by pre-zoning, we're laying out the welcome mat for higher density zoning in some of our settlement areas, which will hopefully streamline the process. So those would be the 3 prongs from planning and development.
And back to me again to talk about the 2 economic development initiatives. First one to talk about is the community or business funded housing consortium. The idea behind this is we know we've got a number of employers that are struggling to find people, and on the other side we have potential candidates for employment that are having trouble finding housing. So what we're proposing with this initiative is to include both businesses as well as potentially community members as investors in a housing development. To help get those employees into the housing market, what we're proposing is working together on a rent-to-own model, whereby a employer could provide a list of employees that are interested in finding housing. Those employees are then offered the option to rent a home. During the first 5 to 6 years, a certain portion of their rent would be held in escrow, and then that could then be used as a down payment for them to eventually purchase the home and remain in the community. For this initiative, we're looking at housing in the attainable level, so in the $200,000 to $300,000 bracket, and looking towards a pilot project with some interested parties, and we've had some fairly positive discussions thus far. This second initiative is something that I think that municipalities have done in industrial lands for a long period of time, whereby a municipality would purchase a piece of land, zone it, service it, subdivide it, get it all set for industrial development, and be very selective about who the municipality sells that land to maximize the amount of employment and economic activity. Well, similar to that, we've seen a number of municipalities now do a similar thing with residential, this community included, whereby they would potentially purchase a piece of land, zone it for residential, subdivide it, and service it, and be very selective about the type of housing that they would permit on, or that they would sell to developers. What this involves is essentially creating a tool whereby a municipality, given the opportunity to purchase a piece of land, would be able to analyze whether or not there's a business case for that purchase. So essentially looking at, well, what's the purchase price going to be? How many units can we expect? What could we expect to sell those lots for? What kind of tax revenue could we expect from that? And essentially determine whether or not there's a business case available for that investment. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Christine, who's going to talk about some housing initiatives.
When we were here in the fall, Barbara Hall and myself, I think we spoke at that time to a rental build and a possible request for proposal that was coming up. So through the county's long-term affordable and housing plan, we have a goal to increase affordable housing. So funding that we received from the province, through the Ontario Priorities Housing Initiative, which we call OFI, we managed to stream our 2 years, our 2020 and our 2021 funding. And even putting those two things together, we were able to come up with $371,315, which we're putting out for a request for proposal to try to get somebody to bid on that so that we're hoping for 3, maybe 4 units out of that. We have put a request into the ministry to reallocate some of the funding that we had in an operating side over to the capital side to try to bring that up over $400,000. So we're waiting to hear back from the ministry on that at this time. So with that funding is giving out to a proponent as a forgivable loan after 20 years. So the money's basically free after the 20 years. The only thing that you have to do is keep the units, those units that are part of your bidding, affordable, meaning at 80% of average market rent for that 20-year period. So that's part of receiving the money as a forgivable loan, would allow you to do that. So it can be new builds, like it could be somebody just building 3 or 4 units. We're hoping, because we all know we need more housing in the county totally, whether some proponent would put in some market rent units with these affordable units to try to create more housing. So the proposal, we're waiting back from the ministry. We're hoping to have it out by the end of March, beginning of April. And if you know of anybody that's interested, please direct them our way so we can send that out to them. And the second initiative that housing has taken the lead on is a public education campaign. So throughout the county, and I think what we're finding, we need to broaden the understanding to the residents of Huron County about the importance of creating more affordable housing. All the new developments going in there seem to be higher end. We have a lot of vulnerable people within our community. Our wait list right now for subsidized housing is over 400 people. So we want to educate the community how it's healthy for everybody, give more real meaning to the people that are experiencing trouble finding housing in the community, just so everybody has a better understanding. Not so much, I don't want a duplex next door or anything, or I don't want affordable housing. Getting everybody to understand that housing's a right for everybody, and the need to have mixed housing throughout the county. So in collaboration with planning and economic development, we're gonna try to come up with a plan. We're at the very preliminary stages of that, but feel it's very important moving forward so that the community understands the need.
So, with your leave, Reeve Bailey, I could take the questions and refer them to the member of our three-person panel here that has the best opportunity to answer any of
I
council's
got my
questions.
hand up first.
Okay.
With the money you're putting towards the housing for the assisted housing, and I'll never use the right terminology, Chris is used to that. Do you reach out to builders and say, if you build a fourplex, we could put X amount of money towards that to help you build something that's more affordable for a working class family? How does that
Yeah,
work?
there is a package. We've certainly had a lot of interest because we have been coming to municipal councils, and I've actually found that there's been builders and stuff at it that have asked for our card. We have a list of people already that it's going out to. We will advertise it on the website and publicly to try to interest builders to come forward for that money. Yeah, our start right now is at the municipal councils, trying to encourage, in case anyone comes to you, to know that we do have this coming up, that you can forward them in our direction, to try to make the best use out of what is minimal, but it's all the money that we've received at this time, so we're gonna try to make the most out of it, so.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Through the market studies on the home sales, has there been any study or any indication of where these home buyers or home sellers are going? People that are selling the homes, are they selling the $300,000 homes to buy the new 451, or are they selling at 300 to try and get something below market?
Did you want to try to do
Like,
that one?
where are they going?
That's an excellent question. Through you, Your Worship. No, we haven't certainly done a study that looked at that. Anecdotally, we have some information on who's coming. We're seeing a lot of individuals from the, they call it the wave. GTA goes to KW, KW goes to Stratford, Stratford comes our way. Who's selling those homes? I wouldn't be able to say off the top of my head, or I'm not sure if it's people upgrading homes or whether they're moving on from a family home to moving into more of a retirement type of home. I'm not certain.
So that would be my second part of the question on with just trying to define if we're building 250 homes in town, is that if the target model is bringing people that are downsizing into your homes, that's your market, not the market of people that can't afford to get into it. People want to build homes that they can make a profit off of, like builders. I just don't know what our key market is, whether it's just the affordable one or the attainable one, or because I just don't know if the ones that are selling are freeing up spaces for people to get in at that level of the market, or is it they're freeing up people from this type of the market coming down? If that's, then there's a double whammy then.
Yeah, that's I think again through Your Worship, what we are seeing in the information that we're getting is that what tends to happen is as those homes sell, we're getting more in from the outside that are pushing those home prices up. So it doesn't end up freeing up homes, but what we're seeing is that it's just sort of pushing prices higher. Without the additional supply coming online to help ease that pressure on those homes, and as well the type of supply that we're seeing, until we sort of can have those conversations and start to see some increased density, some increased options out there on the housing market, we don't foresee there being any relief in sight.
The only thing I would maybe say to that is that there is, I think the public education campaign idea goes a little bit of a way towards educating both your average citizen and the developer community about what kinds of range of housing types are needed. As a planner, what I very frequently see is a developer coming in to develop a bare piece of land into large size lots for large homes, because that's a fairly simple form of development that can turn over and generate some payback for their efforts. But what we need to do is to, and some of our ideas that we've talked about, like the intensification guideline or the pre-zoning of land, are meant to encourage a different kind of market that we haven't seen as much of, which is probably just as profitable, but to create more dense forms of development with a lower price point per unit, but more units, which would be more directly addressing the demand at the working person's level that they're needing.
Christopher?
Yeah, through you, Reeve. I guess a couple of points and a question. You said 400 people, or is it 400 families on the waiting list?
400 individuals. Some of them we have family housing and apartments, so I actually don't have the breakdown of that. So some of them are families, yes.
All right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned pre-zoning for density. It was a way of sort of getting this thing rolling faster. But did I hear this would get out of neighbor comment? Did I hear that?
Okay, I spoke to that. So you would still go through the regular process of a zoning bylaw amendment. It would come to council. It would either be circulated to the neighboring property owners to that property or advertised in the paper. So the neighbors would know that this area is being proposed to be zoned, and they'd have an opportunity to comment at that time. What it would do for the developer is that headache, so to speak, of dealing with the neighbor objections wouldn't be specific to their development. It would be specific to the proposal to zone it for higher density, and that would be dealt with at council's level with the planning department in pre-zoning the land in advance of a developer coming in with a proposal.
Yeah, the trouble is people won't know what's coming. Yeah, density. A lot of people, what's that?
So
it would have to be educate. There would have to be an education there.
It would be upzoning from, say, land that's currently zoned for R1 to higher levels of density, like medium or high density.
Okay, just one more. I'm not actually a bunch, but I'll stop at one for now. I'm one for balance, and I understand where you're coming from. Don't get me wrong. There's a need, but you sort of fluffed off the wave. I don't want to. I don't want people coming from Toronto to Kitchener and then over top of Huron County. Don't forget that we need subdivisions that are $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 houses, because they'll get filled up, and another subdivision or a parcel of land that we own or whatever that we could have some high density in as well. Like I want the balance.
Christopher can answer that.
Through your worship, I couldn't agree more, and I apologize if I gave the impression that was desirable. I couldn't agree more. We absolutely do need that balance, and I think as communities come, as subdivision applications come forward, definitely want to see that balance. Want to have a range of options. I think what concerns all of us at the table here tonight and around as well is that we're not seeing that right now. We're seeing just the new supply that we do see on the market tends to exclusively be in that high end. And certainly, if you ask me today, would I rather see no housing units go forward or a subdivision of 500,000 plus homes? If that's my choice, I'd still rather see all of the $500,000 plus homes go forward. I think more supply is definitely what we need, one way or the other. And I couldn't agree more. There absolutely are some very tangible economic benefits of that wave coming to Huron County and having them here. We just need to make sure that we make efforts to have a variety of housing so that we have something available to all of our hardworking residents.
I'll just follow Chris up with that if you don't mind. On Saturday down at the Hot Stove Lounge, the developer was there, the people own the land, and I specifically asked the $300,000 home you're talking about, is that $300,000 plus land or without land? And he clearly said it was $300,000 land and all. And he clearly said that they're going to start with the more affordable housing on their first plot, and they will actually lead to, along the river, there will be the $500,000 houses, but they're not building them till the end because there's no call for them there. They know the need right now is what I call the working man house. And so they're gonna go after that, but again, you can have a $300,000 house and a $450,000 house beside it. You will decide that as a person, but we're not putting it into the good old fashioned way where this was the rich people and then this is where Bernie lived on the other side of town. Those days are gone. Any other questions, Trev?
Yeah, I think ultimately the biggest thing is that North Huron has had a big issue in the past 25 years is about overall land supply, period. We've had the land, we just have never had any idea to develop it. And the concern is now that we actually have significant levels of development moving forward, but we still haven't got to the position about what is the actual necessary need about what the community is looking for. And that's the biggest concern that, I think we have had as council is, it's fine to have Hutton Heights at 425 possible building units, Hutton Heights at another 50, Blythe have another 25 or 50. The concern is that's fine to have. The concern from this council is that I love the wave. I'll take all the $500,000 houses you want, and then I'll take the tax that's coming with those $500,000 houses in a year from now. The problem is that the houses that we have, we want that mixture, and right now developers have, it's zoned a certain zone, and we as council and the council and the county and that can't force a developer to build high density. There's nothing that's making us make the developer do something that's beneficial to the community, because they have their right as a developer, because they've bought the land, and to do what they have their right to build whatever they so choose. So I think that's the concern, and I completely agree with the, giving it easier to developers to make it easier for them to say, I have a choice, I have thoughts, and if we can take the headaches out of developers' heads about, I don't have to come to a public meeting and show and get railroaded into why I shouldn't build this development. I think if we as council take the brunt of that, I think that will be more beneficial to the community. And I agree with you, Chris, and Councilor Bowman, is we have to educate people about, this could be anywhere from a duplex to what we talked about with the county person last week about the stacked housing. Like, it can be all of that. They need to come and bring their issues and their concerns now, because when a developer does come, you potentially may not have that choice to have an issue, because we've already talked about it, and council knows that making the decision that is a need in the community, and we shouldn't deter a need to have happen. So I think all of this stuff is real. The concern is that we haven't had this problem in North Huron because we've had an abundance of lots. We just have had nobody to build on them at this point. And now we finally do, and now it's trying to get the delicate balance of the $500,000 and the $200,000 house, so that we can have the people, the mom and pop shops and their children stay in North Huron and be able to both live and enjoy without having to worry about eating Cheerios for the next 6 months.
What's wrong with Cheerios? Chris, go ahead.
There's nothing wrong with Cheerios.
Two points. Your service, well, I'm not sure what the whole name is.
Community
Community
housing
service, yeah.
is what we look after, yes.
You said that for an applicant, there was a set of priorities or whatever they have to satisfy, right? And one of them is, renting for 5 years, and the other is working in the county, correct? I read that. If,
is this referring to the funding that we have available?
yes. Well, it's for an applicant, if they wanted to purchase one of these homes, and they have to satisfy these prerequisites in order to be accepted.
So I don't know that I was talking to that today, when you're talking about somebody
It's in the
purchasing.
report. It's in the 500 pages that I read.
That report, so that was Chris's report.
Yeah,
Is this the Community Business Funded Housing Consortium idea?
I suppose. I
Okay.
didn't title it.
So I guess I'll do my best to address
Table
that.
1.
The idea behind that is essentially this would all be funded. The model that we're looking at creating would all be funded by private money and result in market housing. So market housing that is attainable. So the investors that are helping make that housing move forward would be, potentially employers. So as a result of that, they have some ownership in that specific housing development. That's a little different than what Christine had been talking about earlier, where there's subsidized housing, where an individual who wants to be, who would like a unit, would then go through the county's Housing and Property Services Department and apply to be on that list. So they're two very, very separate items.
Okay. But I guess where I'm getting at is the one point about they have to have a job in the county. But I know that we would feel strongly about, we have need here, so if there was one of those buildings here and an applicant was applying, for us, it would be better if that person had a job in one of our factories type of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have the power to ask that, but I know it would go better.
Our rental build money does not have a prerequisite that the people living in it have to work in
I
your
read it.
county.
I read it somewhere.
Yeah, so I'm thinking that must be one of the other initiatives that you have, because for the rental build money, that $400,000 that's available, the only requirement is that the people that you put in there, when we evaluate, if you focus on seniors or mental health or something, there is more points can be allotted when we do assess them, but they just have to rent them at 80% of what average market rent is in the area. We don't have any prerequisites other than that.
Yeah, I've got it under Table 1, process and people. But anyways, then Mrs. Hoffman,
Yeah.
Your report, the social economic blend of property. I know where you're going with it, but I just see hiccups because you're gonna have some people that are paying full rent here and their neighbor's gonna be 80% of the rent, and I'm just wondering how the cohesion will be.
It's happening throughout the province. I mean, in the past, we've had rent supplement programs, and the idea of rent supplement that was created years ago was that you put people that have a deeper need, so like a 30% of their income rent, in with people in the private market, that it makes it healthier for everybody. So that's kind of where it's leading, is like, it's okay to have somebody next to you that can't afford as high a rent. I do understand where you say people, and that's part of the education, I think, is that people need to understand. My neighbor might be a single mom with 3 kids, so yeah, she can't afford what I can, but I'm working full-time with whatever. And I think that's part of our education campaign, so that people don't judge people on how much money they make or where they should have to live or something, to get rid of that stigmatism around what people can afford.
Yeah, I guess, sorry, sir.
Yep.
One last little point. Throughout the reports, housing projects, the term is used, and everybody's got a bad, I'm not sure, change the term, because it gets a bad rap, thinking of Toronto and all the news that comes out of there. All it is gangs, murders, rapes, and drugs.
Yeah.
So just the term is what I'm after.
Yeah, so the province itself has changed. It was public housing, it switched to social housing. They've now recently changed it to community housing, I think trying to take away that stigmatism. And part of our public education campaign, I think, is putting a face to some of these things as well. Like when we talk about public housing, some people do relate that to Toronto, the people that are, you know, some of the gangs and stuff that you suggest, but as I said, it could be your next door neighbor that's struggling, right? Next paycheck, they might not have their home anymore, right? It's bringing a face and a reality to the people that are your neighbors in the community. And that's what we really hope to do, is take away that stigmatism.
Chris, I got a question. You mentioned you're going to get some investors together and see if they would invest in and then on affordable housing. Have you guys tried that yet, or this is still up in the clouds figuring it out?
We've had some preliminary discussions. We're not at a point where I can say publicly about any progress at this point, but I shouldn't say that there hasn't been any progress. There's been progress, but not at the point yet where we're ready to talk publicly. I think I know that the employers in North Huron and in the Wingham area specifically have taken a very strong leadership role, as you know better than anyone else, I think. I think we're seeing some interesting things happening. Watching from the sidelines as they speak with Mr. Searson and his development in Wingham Creek. So I think there's a lot of positive things moving forward, and we hope to keep those things happening.
Good show. Any other questions for these folks? Seeing none, I would like to thank you folks very much for making the trip over here. I hear you've had quite a busy night.
It was great. It worked out great.
I want you guys to know that we held our meeting back an hour waiting for
Thank
you.
you. It's good of you to do that.
Because we knew you'd be late.
Yeah.
We did.
Anyway, thank you very much for coming
Thank
out.
you.
We do appreciate it.
Thank you
Thank
again
you.
for having us. I always appreciate it.
Number 7, reports. We have nothing from the clerk, nothing from the finance, recreation, 7.3.1. That the Council Township of North Huron hereby receives a report prepared by the Director of Recreation and Community Services dated March 2nd, 2020 regarding the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association's Gender Equality and Recreational Sport Community Grants Initiative for information purposes. I'm going to get a mover and seconder, and Vicky's going to talk to that. Can I have a mover? I have Anita. Seconder. I have Kevin. Vicky.
Thank you, Your Worship. As indicated in the report before you, the Canada Parks and Recreation Association has undertaken an initiative to increase female participation in recreational sport by the year 2022. The first phase of their initiative is to provide funding to municipalities, indigenous communities, and nonprofit sector to reduce barriers that are hindering the female participation in recreational sport. Two barriers that have been identified are the lack of recreational sport programs available to female participants and difficulty in them finding and or paying for child minding to allow their participation in programs. In December, staff submitted a program proposal to the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association. The program proposal was to develop a women's hockey program, which would basically help women in sport develop skills that could be transferred to different sporting activities, but also build their endurance and stamina. But another segment of it was to provide child minding while they participated in that program. The program would be offered 6 hours a week in the spring and the fall and would utilize both the Blythe and Wingham facilities. The program would run for approximately 25 weeks. The estimated cost of the program is $11,243. Of which $7,336 would be for rental fees in our facilities. Recently staff were notified that the township will be receiving one of 13 grants in the amount of $5,000, which was awarded across Canada. The $5,000 grant will go to cover about 44% of the program costs. The remainder of the costs will be covered by registration and childminding fees. There is a projected shortfall of approximately $643, and that shortfall will be covered off by other program registration fees that we have.
Thank you. Any questions or comments or concerns for Vicky? Go ahead, Trevor.
Vicky, was there consultation with female users in the sense of why women's hockey versus some other program that we could have offered, that we're already offering? You just didn't maybe extending the need or the what we currently offer. There's just the question. I don't know whether that's something we asked the people of the users.
Through your worship, we have been trying to get a women's hockey program off the ground, and we have been running into some issues, and the main issue is the child minding. I think so. There definitely is an interest in participating in this program.
Okay. Anyone else? Before I call the vote, I'd like to say congratulations on getting that money, only being one of 13 in all of Canada. Sweet. I call the motion. Everybody in favor? Carries. 7.4.1 is the FA 2020-03 Blythe Public Works Sand Shed, single source and pre-budget approval request. That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report of the Director of Public Works dated March 2nd, 2020 regarding construction of the Blythe Public Works Sand Shed for information. And further, the council authorized staff to submit a minor variance application for the purpose of seeking relief to allow the construction of a sand shed which exceeds the height restrictions for accessory buildings in North Huron's zoning bylaw. And further, that council grants pre-budget approval for the design, engineering, and construction of the Blythe Public Works Sand Shed for an update limit of $251,500 plus applicable taxes, subject to the minor variance application coming into effect and force. And further, that the project be awarded to Dom Construction Limited under the single source provisions for the North Huron procurement policy. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin. Do I have a seconder? I have Trevor. Sorry. It's getting worse, isn't it, guys? I'm still here.
Just let me know if I have to give you a shock or anything.
Questions or comments? Oh, Sean's going to speak to it first, and then we're going to go to Chris. Sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's quite a bit of a report. As you can see, we're trying to get some miles out of each report, so there's a number of items in here. But really the background on this, 2019 was a busy year on a number of fronts, not the least of which was the fact that the Blythe Fire Hall and Public Works Garage was designed, tendered, constructed, and put into operation as a fire hall at least by January 31st of this year. We're expecting, based on the current schedule, that site work will be completed by the end of May. The site plan that was approved by council for the facility did, as you'll recall, include a future sand shed. As I mentioned, it was a push last year to make this thing happen. So in the interest of time, and because the sand shed was identified as not immediately operational critical, the decision was made to tender the project in the absence of the sand shed, despite the fact that it was referenced in the site plan. As the project nears completion, we've got the time to be able to focus on the construction of the sand shed without having any negative impact on the remaining work that needs to be done. We went to Dom Construction for pricing on a 10-meter by 15-meter concrete and wood frame steel clad structure that would be constructed to match the new Fire Hall Public Works Garage. Estimated cost to design, engineer, and construct the unit would be $251,500 plus applicable taxes. Now, during the review process, it was also determined that a minor variance application is required to allow the construction of the building because it exceeds the height restrictions for an accessory building in our own zoning bylaw, specifically because it abuts onto residential property. staff are seeking council's authorization to proceed with submitting the minor variance application, getting that process started. At the same time, you will notice that we sole sourced or single sourced this unit. We believe that this fit very well into our own procurement policy's single source policy or clause. In this particular case, the approach was applied because it is a continuation of a previous service which was procured through a proper competitive process. The continuation of the service with DOM would do a couple things. It would ensure that we're using like and compatible materials. It would ensure that there was an aesthetic match to the two structures, and it avoids any complication that would be associated with having two different contractors working at the same job site, particularly when we are getting into the period where we have to look at getting the site work completed. And then the other piece to this, once awarded, we would look at the construction of the building utilizing a phased approach. And what we mean by this is there's a little bit of work that may or may not be associated with the construction, specifically the minor variance work, possibly an EA for sand storage or salt storage. So what we're proposing in order to do the work efficiently and minimize waste, we would have the foundation put in and bring the foundation up to just above finished grade, which would allow Dom to go in, do all the site work. We'll go into all the other processes we have to deal with, and that way we don't have to go and tear up a bunch of new asphalt to put foundation or structure back in. So it made sense to use this phased approach. And as mentioned earlier, we're permitted to go a maximum, I believe, of 6 meters in height. This building will slightly exceed that because obviously we want it to have sufficient height to store sand materials. So we would want to go through that variance process. Now, once this project was completed, which we anticipate to be in the neighborhood of $251,500, that would put us in a position where if council wished, they can declare all of the Mill Street properties surplus. Public Works, the old fire hall, Public Works garage, and the sand shed, which would permit council to move ahead with everything.
Thank you, Sean. Questions or comments for Sean? We'll start with Anita and end with Chris. No, not end with, please second.
Sean, can you please explain why the building has to cost $284,000? What's so special about it? Because you can buy a pretty decent house for that.
Yes, it's because of the intended purpose. If it's to be used as a sand shed, it has to be designed structurally so that it can actually support the side loads. So what you're looking at is a concrete foundation with internal buttresses and supports that has to go down to finished grade. You'll recall that when we built, we had to build the property up, so we've got to go quite a ways down to put the footings in. You get up to grade, then we have to go at least 10 foot high with the concrete walls, because again, you're filling it with sand. The sand is piling up, it's exerting forces on the side walls. So if you built a regular shed, it would not support the proposed use for the building.
Do you put any sand on the sides or gravel so that the...
Not on the outside, no. On the outside, actually, there's an apron, and that's where the fueling systems would go.
And will there be any doors on there as well, or not?
One main garage door, which would be 16 foot wide by 18 foot high to allow access, full access of a tandem dump truck or larger, and then one just access door. But the big reason for the cost is all of the side load that type of
the extra
structure.
Concrete and the rebar that has to go.
It's concrete and rebar.
Okay.
Christopher?
Yeah, through you, Reeve. Sean, I'm similar question. I have a lot of trouble with it. It's too much money. It's 30 by 45, a little bigger than this room, and it just blows my mind. I'm wondering what the shed cost at the East Walnash shed. The East Walnash one. Like, there's a nice sand shed or salt shed in there. Does anyone remember what it cost? And was it just a local contractor that built that, or who? Or?
I Through you, Your Worship, I don't have those prices in front of me. I do have the quote, and if it helps to understand, of the $220,000 subtotal for the construction, you know, the rest is your engineering, or that includes, sorry, some of the engineering, so you're actually $204,000 for the building. Of that, only $73,400 is the structure. The rest is all your concrete work, your design work, and then there's stuff that's not gonna change regardless, such as electrical and that sort of thing. So the actual physical steel-clad, wood-constructed building is not near the bulk of the cost. It's concrete, it's design work, and it's the underground reinforcing for that type of use.
Like, that's important information to know, because it helps.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, I believe I have a mover and seconder.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Paul.
I understand, I went to Sean Dask, I thought it was quite high too, but then after seeing the rebar and all the cement, I wasn't reading that into the thing. I'm just curious with, you said it's 6 meters is our height we can have. How much higher are we going to be above that? Like you said just a little bit, or for the minor variance? I'm just curious.
They're still working out those details,
Oh.
but they know we're going to definitely exceed that. And 6 meter is to, I believe, roughly halfway up the peak of the building, and we know it'll be slightly higher than that, so. Again, this is a design build, so the design and construction work is yet to be done, other than it's a principle and concept.
And through you, Reeve.
Yep.
My only other thing is, it'd be a lot easier, probably I wouldn't have these questions if next time we could, if a build comes up, maybe if we could have maybe the 3 quotes from things, you know what I mean? Like, I know this carried on with the first, you were saying that, though I didn't realize it was already in the earlier stage, but just that, then we'd be able to say, oh yeah, each of them, there is more work in there than what we ever thought of. Just curious with that.
Through your worship, yeah, if we were into a normal procurement, we would definitely have all the price comparisons in front of you, because it's sole source, it's, maybe it's a little different or more difficult to discern.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carried. Fire department, we have no reports. Building department, we have no reports. Child care department. I'm gonna get a mover and a seconder, and then we're gonna have Val speak to it. 7.7.1, that the council of the township of North Huron hereby receives a report of the manager of the Children's Center dated March 2nd, 2020 regarding a new supervisor, early childhood educator position profile, and revisits management of manager and revised manager of children's service position profile. And further, that the council approves a supervisor, early childhood educator position profile and the revised manager of children's service position profile as attached. And further, that the council approves the placement of the supervisor, early childhood educator position profile in band 6 of the pay grid. And further, that the council grants the pre-budget approval of and authorizes staff to proceed with advertising for hiring 2 supervisor early childhood educators. And further, that council authorize staff to advertise and hire any vacated positions due to the new position. Do I have a mover? I have Rick. Do I have a seconder? I have Anita. Questions and comments? Oh, sorry, I don't know where I am tonight. Sorry, Val, go for it.
Thank you. Through you, Reeve. We did develop the supervisor positions as was instructed by council, and we took them forward to our Gallaghers to have them banded and placed on our pay grid ladder. They did fall where initially they didn't, but there was some confusion over what they would be doing. So once we clarified that, they did fall in with all other lead hands and other supervisors, such as aquatic supervisors and fitness supervisor and recreation supervisors. So we felt that they did fall appropriately into the right band at band 6. Basically, it was as you had indicated, the restructuring will allow us, the 2 profiles. The person that reviewed the positions suggested that they're very similar, so instead of labeling them separately, is to have 2 people fill a similar position, just as a supervisor and our early childhood educator. And then we can use them and apply them as we wish throughout the services. I think with the stuff that we brought forward previously, we would go, the cost to do the 2 supervisor positions, because it's not a big increase in their steps on the pay grid ladder, is only approximately $1,400 per person. So we were looking at doing the 2 supervisor positions as previously discussed. What it would do then, we were going to add the 1 additional registered permanent early childhood educator. That cost is the $11,000, and that's the increase is basically, they move up a step on the pay grid ladder to become a permanent position versus a part-time. And it also increases their benefit costs when they become permanent. So we would have 1 new permanent with this restructuring plan that we had discussed previously. And we were likely to have 2 permanent people step up into the positions vacated for the people taking supervisor roles. So what I see is we have a whole slew of staff working for us. We only have 5 who are permanent right now. We're going to advertise to fill 2 supervisor roles. I would assume that some of my long-term employees would apply for those roles. So we would hire them into those positions. They would vacate 2 permanent RECE positions. So we would fill those as indicated in the request. And we are going to add 1 additional registered permanent early childhood educator. And again, the purpose of doing all of this is to help even out the workloads and make sure we're attention to detail, make sure that we're managing our wait list appropriately, and making sure staff are getting a lot of feedback and support in their locations. We would add additional part-time hours to cover the office hours that we're looking at having the 2 supervisors do, which is a total of 8 hours a week. So that comes to approximately $24,000. So our total cost in filling these positions and implementing the new roles is approximately $59,800. But as previously done with our bylaws in rates and fees, with the increase in the rates and fees, we are estimating approximately $81,000 increase in revenue. We also, we're trying to take into account some of our unexpected funding that we get on a regular basis, and actually trying to count on that so that we can be more accurate in our budgeting for you guys, so we're not asking for more support than we need. So we believe we can fund $86,000. So with our $5,000 from the county and our increase in revenue. So we shouldn't increase our costs in operations significantly at all with this new proposed structuring. The only other thing I would add in is that with the projections, and I'm not, what do you call it, a fortune teller, so I can't say for sure it's going to work out the way I anticipate, because the numbers can go up and down. But I know Dwayne helped me with this report, and he did indicate that if you really want it to be moving forward, you might even consider 1 more permanent RECE, because then that would take us up to 7 full-time registered early childhood educators with 2 supervisors and 1 manager. And currently we're using at least 18 to 20 people per day working, fairly significant hours. So if there's questions, I'll try to answer them. I'm not sure if I have all the details, but I can try and answer any questions you might have about the proposal. Basically, we would like to move forward with the advertising and filling of all the positions.
Kevin?
Through you, this might be a question maybe for Donna. and it's just for my own information, why is this a pre-budget request when the budget will be out, and wouldn't this be in the budget for next year? I just don't know why. It's just a clarification. I don't know why it's in pre-budget and why it wouldn't be just a budget item.
I have it estimated into the budget, but if we were to advertise and fill those roles now, that would be ahead of the budget being approved.
Okay, so
Hopefully.
it's just a time,
It's
surely
just a
time.
timeline
Okay.
thing, but
That-
I
that was
did
just for my
estimate it in the
clarification.
budget, so it's not going to change the budget.
I thought it
That's
was,
just-
so that's why I was curious.
No, it's not gonna change the
Yeah.
budget that I present to you, but hopefully I can advertise prior to our budget being
Okay.
finalized.
Okay, thanks.
You know, maybe we should get our budget done.
That'd be great.
There's a
too.
lot of pre-budgets here, isn't there?
Yeah.
Donna's gonna be having headaches.
No,
Who else? Any
it's
other
all
questions, comments, concerns? Go ahead, Chris.
Through you, Reeve, Valerie, you almost need a blackboard and arrows as to where everything is. It gets confusing. Anyways, the suggestion is, I don't know, we're not voting on this at this moment, but band 9 or 10, what's the difference?
I don't have the numbers in front of me, as far as the costs. I know that, Dwayne had put in the band 10. I think there's not huge differences because there's such a wide, what do you call that, a range within a band. So, I know we're not asking for that tonight anyway, but, I'm not sure that that impacts it at this point.
Yeah, just in the report, so I just wanted to
Yeah.
comment on it.
Yeah, I know that he has in the band 10 is 4166
Yeah, I see that.
to 5208.
Yeah, we just,
But I'm currently in band 8.
because I think we need to allow the person the flexibility, like they have to grow, right?
Oh, yeah, and that's in a band system, and I'm sure that Dwayne could comment on it further, but that is why we have 5 steps in each band. So the workload is, the band you're placed on is based on your workload and how many people you're supervising, your education, what training you have to have, and what kind of legislations you have to follow. But then your steps across the band, which is where you have your low to your high, that is based on your experience and start rate. So once I retire, you'll likely, unless you hire super experienced Toronto manager, start someone at the very low end of your manager, step 1, whatever band you put them in, kind of thing.
Well, no one can match you, so.
Oh, well, that's a very kind thing to say, but I'm pretty sure you have we have excellent staff at the Child Care Center, so I'm pretty sure you have great girls coming up that are gonna step in, but yeah, that's, sometimes even when you move bands, like for my girls that are moving up the band, because they're already partway across another band, they're not even really gonna make much financial gain by taking the position. I'm gonna give them more workload, but they're only going to get, what, is it $1,200 or $1,400 more on their salaries, so they were kind of looking at that and thinking, wow. Wow. But it's a valuable experience for them to gain that experience before they move into other positions as well.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, Reeve, my comment is really about the timing of this. You know, when we talked about this in October, this was in my mention, it was a 911. We need this now. What are we waiting for? Council, please help me. We're now in March. We're not gonna get somebody, in my mind, if we apply and hire, even if you're getting internal staff, you have to backfill new staff, you're looking at 5 to 6 weeks, maybe as long as 8. So we're looking at May. My only point, my position is that this is long overdue, and I was really expecting, especially with the previous report, and saying that there was other communities who already had these supervisorial positions. Why was it that we took so long in order to get the job description to the banding and get it on our desk for February 3rd or March the 2nd? In my mind, I don't know, I'm not you, but it just seems a long, drawn-out process to get us to here. when I was really hoping that this was gonna be a, hire somebody and be ready for January 31st at the very least, and now we may not be until May. So that's a comment. I'm not asking for any question. It's just my opinion of the process of this. This took way too long in order to get us to something that we knew was a 911, and we knew that we were getting from staff. Senior management, but also we were hearing it from the lower level stand, because this is going to help. This is going to help the individuals who are on the front lines of the child care service, that they're going to understand there is a growth profession here. Now they know where they can go from registered ECE to supervisor to manager if they so choose. Before they didn't know that. Now they know, and now they have a guide to get there. So to me, this is only going to help the situation, and hopefully it will help with maintaining the employment level that we have at the daycare, because I know we cannot continually to have 71 on the wait list and not expect that this is going to, we're getting now to critical stage where it's not only going to hurt economic development and labor forces, but when people can't get childcare, they can't work in your community. So I think we ultimately have to do something, and I'm very appreciative of the report today, but I think it needed to come faster, is my point.
Thank you, Trevor. Anyone else? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. 7.8.1, that the Council Township of North Huron hereby receive the report of the CEO dated March 2nd, 2020 regarding next steps for the Hutton Heights development. And further, the council authorized staff to retain E.M. Ross and Associates to commission blocks, subdivision designs, and phasing options for the council's consideration. And further, the council authorized staff to retain the Ontario Land Surveyors to prepare the land survey for the purpose of delineating the boundaries of the subject land. And further, the council authorized staff to commission a staff impact study and a stormwater management report in support of the potential plan of subdivision application. And further, the council authorized pre-budget approval for the work regarding subdivision designs, phasing options, land survey, traffic impact study, and stormwater management to be completed. Do I have a mover? I have Trevor, seconder. I have Paul. Dwayne, would you speak to this?
Thanks, Reeve. So this is a report essentially to move Hutton Heights further along in the development process. So just as a reminder for council's information, we've commissioned the environmental assessment work, we've commissioned the archaeological assessment work, and we've also commissioned B.M. Ross and Associates to do the design work for the water and the sanitary. And the water sanitary design work is out to the development, but also, as council recall, there's an earlier motion to expand the scope of that work to include Crawford Street. So that's the work that we've approved to date. In terms of moving this development forward, there will be a plan of subdivision application that will be required. And in support of that, the environmental and the archaeological, but you'll see in the report there's actually 12 additional items that we'll need to address on a go-forward basis. So essentially, to move it along, we need to give some consideration, although we don't have to give that consideration tonight, in terms of the role that we're going to have as a municipality in the development process. So council can develop all or portion of the lands, or council can look at creating blocks and selling all or parts of the land to developers. Regardless of the municipality's role and regardless of which option you choose, the studies that are outlined in the report do need to be completed to support subdivision application. So as council's aware, in the draft 2020 budget, we have $80,000 for the completion of the additional studies. And in terms of next steps, there's essentially 4 next steps that we can be looking at. And they're outlined in the report as well. The first is to proceed with designing a block subdivision designs and looking at some phasing options to bring back for council's consideration. As part of that, or to do that, we need a land survey that will delineate the boundaries of the subject lands. Third, we need to look at doing a traffic impact study because as you can appreciate, we're going to have increased traffic off of Highway 4 into or onto Lloyd Street to accommodate this development. But we're suggesting in terms of that traffic impact study that it be broadened in scope to look at all. There's some additional undeveloped lands in Hutton Heights, so when we're doing the traffic impact study, not just doing it specific for Hutton Heights, but to look at to max it out in terms of the whole area. And the fourth is development of a stormwater management report, and to look at how we're going to deal with that. So going back to my earlier comment in terms of the standard practice essentially in the development is that a developer require parcel land and they would develop it in their entirety. As we're aware, this has caused or did cause significant landsome development here in North Huron. So to mitigate that against that, it's suggested as we move forward that council consider subdividing Hutton Heights lands into blocks and selling the blocks to a variety of developers, and as part of that include buyback clauses. So if a developer does acquire a block and they're not moving on it, as a municipality we'd be able to acquire that back. And that's a common practice, and actually we've done that previously. And the other thing in terms of selling it to a variety of developers is that you're going to have a variety of housing types and you're going to have different styles. So essentially you'll notice there's some subdivision, it's 1 or 2 homes and it's the same 1 or 2 homes throughout the whole subdivision. If you do the block approach, a developer will acquire those lands and then you'll have control over how those lands are developed and what type of housing goes on those blocks. Which brings me back to my earlier point, just in terms of preparing subdivision designs and phasing. It's recommended that we look at it from a block approach. So in other words, the recommendation is that we commission B.M. Ross and Associates to prepare a plan of subdivision that would block out Hutton Heights. But as part of that as well, look at doing a phasing plan in terms of how we would do that. And the purpose of the phasing plan is that is then going to inform and guide how we're going to do, or how infrastructure would be done. To do the internal infrastructure for the development, the projected estimate is $3.4 million, in addition to 1.8 estimate to get the services actually to the property. But by doing the phasing plan, that $3.4 million could potentially be spread out over a period of time, again, depending on what role we as a municipality want to have in that process. The other studies, there's 4 studies that are recommended here to move forward with. There are additional studies. You'll notice that there's actually 12. Out of the 12, the recommendation is to move ahead with 4 because the remaining studies essentially deal with what I term as the finer details of the development. So in terms of those, that work does need to be completed, but you need to do this upfront work before you can get to the finer details of the development. Again, there's $80,000 in the draft 2020 budget. Right now, in terms of the archaeological work, the environmental work, and the design work is being done. There's the ability to move forward with these other studies and reports, in particular the 4. Essentially, what we are seeking is pre-budget council approval to move forward with those studies and to continue on with the process as we move forward. As noted under future considerations, in terms of, as council is aware, council granted a 1-year extension for the former A2A development, now referred to as Maitland Estates, so that development is moving forward. At the last council meeting, council authorized staff to proceed and commence a phase 1 and phase 2 site condition assessment on the Wayne Trailer Park. And as well, staff are currently involved in some discussions with some private North Huron property owners who have expressed an interest in developing their lands for residential purposes. Those are all discussions at this point, not something that we can go into in detail at this time. So in terms of the construction and installation of the water main and the sanitary service system, It's suggested from a staff's perspective that council, at this point, defer any decisions regarding that until later this year. But the studies that are identified in the report, being 4, we can continue on with those regardless.
Thank you, Dwayne. Questions or comments from the council? Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, on the development of stormwater management, does that involve, let's say, the blocks you're talking about? That's going to cover every different scenario could happen, that ground, the stormwater management would look after, no matter what way you put the buildings, let's say?
Go ahead. Through your V. So in terms of stormwater management report, it'll look at how the stormwater from the development will be addressed. So things, for example, stormwater management plan, for example, and if we require stormwater management plan, where within that development would it be constructed, and potentially to what capacity in terms of how big.
Other questions? Go ahead, Paul.
And through you, Reeve, you said you had confidential discussions. I'm not asking anything, just were they positive? Like with the owners, or is that a question you shouldn't ask?
No, we'll tell you later.
Oh, okay, no, that's fine. You just got my curiosity.
It's very confidential, yes.
No, but is it positive? Positive? Does it look positive in what I'm saying?
I would say so.
Okay, good.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was just wondering, just want to clarify, 80 grand covers the 4, like including the block design and all that? Or is that where you add that other 30 or 40,000?
No, so through your, so in terms of the 80,000, the 80,000 is for the completion of the studies, 1 to 12. I'm not anticipating that the 4 is going to take 80,000.
As well?
No.
Like, I mean...
No. That we'll be able to complete the 4 studies under the 80,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's additional money there as we move through the development, as we move through the process. There's additional items that are outlined in the report that will need to be completed, but those will be completed later on in the process after we kind of get these 4 plus the archaeological, the environmental, and then the design work done.
Okay, baby steps, okay.
Yeah.
I actually have a question. When we're putting these pipes in and doing all this work, there's also the owner of the, I think it's 15 acres extra that's privately owned out there approached me. Will he be able to hook into that through time and make use of his properties too? Like we're making sure that we can. Go ahead.
So essentially, in terms of the design work that's being done is for our development.
But if we ran a pipe out there and then he decided to develop that 10 years from now, the pipe would fit it?
The pipe would have to be extended.
Yes.
And there'd be additional cost for that.
Okay, yes.
Yes,
Yes.
but that is currently not factored into
No.
the design.
Okay, great, that's all yes,
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to know. Yep. Go ahead, Trev.
Yeah, the only thing that we added in the design work is the adding the part down
Crawford Street. Yep.
was to add them into the discussion. That was the only thing we added, so nothing on to the other developments that are not owned by North Huron or are not currently owners on or paying taxes in North Huron.
Yes, yeah, yes. Okay. Anyone else? I think I have a mover and a seconder, so all in favor? Carries. We don't have any correspondence, council reports. Starting with the Reeve. I would just like to report that our request for $75,000 towards the Path Future for Service Excellent, we've got it. We have $75,000. What's that?
Yeah, the service delivery.
Yeah, the service delivery view.
We did get it?
It's 75,000 anyway, we got it. Just got this letter in today and I just wanted to share it with you. I just want to point out something that I noticed right away. The review project being undertaken by your community is an important step towards achieving Ontario's goals of helping municipalities deliver efficient, effective, modern services that may meet the evolving needs of your community. man, that is what we're doing, folks. So that was good timing, and I want to thank the staff for applying for that. Quite happy we got that. At the Saturday morning meeting for the new development that we have going on in Wingham here, you literally could not stand in that room. And for any of us that were there, I've seen you, Anita, you were like stuck in there somewhere too. It was amazing, the turnaround. I don't think we ever expected that. You literally, and I see Donna and Vicky was there, but it was just, you couldn't put another person. I don't know if anybody was standing outside, and there were lots of good questions, and it was well received. The other thing I was involved in this time around was the newcomers. Again, I went out to visit with the newcomers. We have it over here at the I was going to say arena, but not. It's a library. And Chad Krieger and Ken DeBreeze came out and did a demonstration for the newcomers about safety and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you could just see a nice coming together. It's not cold, it's easing up, and you're becoming part of the team, and they really appreciate it. And both those guys stretched out a welcome to our newcomers. If you're walking by the fire department on a Monday night, we always do training in there. Feel free to come in. And I'm willing to bet you those folks will take them up on it. It was that pleasant of a time the other night. So I just wanted to extend a large thank you out to the fire department. That's about all I have today, because I'm probably going to babble on a little later here, so I'll save it for then. So let's go to council. Council members' reports. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Reeve. This past weekend and week till Wednesday down at the Good Roads, I wish I had good news to bring to council that some of our problems in rural community are being addressed. I got the feeling from I would have to say the Ford Nation in politics that we're not being considered as rural anymore. We're just not urban yet. The initiatives that they had for rural transportation, I thought might be something to connect us to, Kitchener, London, something. The only thing that was in their grasp of vision was north of Sault Ste. Marie up through the northern portions, where I agree they have lost the Greyhound through the west and are about to lose some transportation modes up that way, but there was nothing other than the great talk about subways and high-speed rail and light rail for the larger centers. I found nothing that would help us here. They were leaving that mainly in the hands of the entrepreneurs. If someone wanted to come forward with something they wanted to do, a case study or a trial period, that they would help out in some way, but they were not taking a leading role in solving this problem, which I find leads into the county's talk about affordable housing and people in that demographic generally don't own a car and need transportation means. So we're kind of left by ourselves out here in the new rule, or not the old rule. That's the only thing I brought back from there. There really wasn't anything that sparked my attention that, hey, they're listening and it's going to help us out here. They really were just touting their horns about new subway for Toronto or something for Ottawa, which was a shame, and there was nothing in between. That's what I brought back. I don't know whether my cohort there was down there with me has any other comments to make, but it just sounded like unfortunately the same horns tooting. So.
Thank you, Paul.
Yes, I went to the Sustainable Hearing again. So many of those meetings are climate change. And because we're such a agricultural county, they do a lot with ag end. They want more cover crops put on and fencing off beside streams and rivers just to let that grass grow, just to prevent that from going. And we are very fortunate. We don't live along Lake Huron, because they're very concerned they're going to have some troubles there with, as you say, you've probably seen some of the cottages that are getting pretty close to the lake. And it's just the up and down weather we have, so drastic, and so a lot of these other places have problems too, so it is interesting. And then we had our made up museum meeting today, and I'll be able to tell you that all our things are up to date now, so things are going well. Hopefully our next meeting will pretty well cover a lot of them in. So Vicky was there, and she seemed to be happy with how things are going too, so that was good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Trev?
I just wanted to bring that the Wingham BIA had their annual general meeting last Thursday, the 20th. And they had, where they passed their 2020 budget. That should be sent to Donna. It does have, in that budget, I will just give council a heads up that they have the initiative to complete the LED sign that it was talked about in 2019 here at this council. They're optimistically hoping that will be in place in 2020. It's in the budget. Whether it actually gets completed or not, we'll see. At that time, they celebrated 5 new businesses in the municipality in Wingham. As well as some businesses actually that aren't new but have actually expanded. One is the Lone Wolf Antiques. He is moving locations from where he is currently to the old Hannah store, which is right beside the Remax, which is actually going to double his size currently from about 900 square feet to about 1,800 square feet. So he is, him and his partner there were at the annual general meeting, so they were very excited about that. And as the BIA, we were very excited to hear that. So I think the BIA has obviously had some significant initiatives going forward over the past year, and they are very happy with the support they're getting from this council, as well as Public Works and Sean's group as it relates to that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to bring that back to council, as they did have their annual general meeting, and it was, I would say it was a rather, it was a heated affair, I would say, in certain places, but it was dealt with in an amicable and public way, and I think at the end of the day, the membership got what they asked for. They voted. There was one new board member, Ryan Ferguson from the Cooperators. He's going to start on the board. So I think at this point the BIA is moving forward in their initiatives.
Thank you. Anything from this side, Rick?
Yeah, through you, Reeve, I gotta agree with Councillor Faulkner in regards to the good roads. But one session I sat in that was interesting was the GEMS, like 2+1 roads. I thought it was quite interesting in regards to safety. And that's where you would have 3 lanes of traffic that alternate with a barrier down the middle. Quite interesting. And the cost difference, a regular road, I think 4 lanes is what, 5 to 6 million a kilometer, and this is probably 2.5. So savings too. Their planned project is actually Highway 11 going north, but Kevin's.
I think it was out west. I heard something about that, where everybody's going to work one way, so they all go this way, and then 2 lanes go that way, and then they switch it over coming home.
Oh, those are controlled traffic lights.
Oh.
This is actually, it's just 2 lanes with a barrier and 1 lane for 3 or 4 kilometers, and they switch it.
Oh.
Because you get those people, and that's where accidents come from, is from human mistakes. That way, in 3 or 4 kilometers, you're going to get by that person.
I get it.
And this all comes from in Sweden and Ireland and stuff. It's all part of that zero vision zero.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Good show. Anybody else? Not seeing any. Let's move on to council member reports. Oh, sorry. Comments by members, because I know Chris would like to speak to one, and then we'll go to Trevor.
Okay.
I can't wait till the driverless cars come. That'll confuse them. Anyways, Reeve, I just wanted to bring this to everybody's attention. AG4, that is where you're up to 10 acres, and house and barn, and you can have as many animals, because of the Nutrient Management Act, you can have as many animals as you care, as long as you have a plan to get rid of the manure. That's the way it is today. County wants to change it. Technically, it would look the same, all the same parameters, except you can even have a little barn, no problems, you just can't have any animals in it. They're wanting, because of past lawsuits and what have you, troubles, they want to eliminate the animal factor. And two things come from that. It's we're going to have lawsuits coming out of our yin yang, and it's not going to be the county that gets sued, it'll be the lower tiers, because I don't know what they're thinking and how they want to get around it, but the Nutrient Management Act is superior. It's province. And what county's trying to do, lower tier, is alter it. And you can't. They can try, but if a smart person, they do it to a smart person, they're going to sue. Because province comes first, always does. And then Canada comes above the province, usually, in those situations, in any situation. That's just how it goes. So I'm concerned about that. And the other one is it eliminates places for the Amish and the Mennonites. It just totally whips them out. So, and they're here, they're in other municipalities, and they're all having children, and they're just around, and this is their home too, and they've got no place. And you know, if an G4 comes up, you know, they can just jump right on it today, and have a home, have a garden, have a horse, have a couple of animals, and they're happy. So those are the two factors that this is causing, the problems that it's causing potentially. You know, I don't know any other details really, but this I do know is that they're playing with fire, and county, our Reeve will be voting on this on Wednesday, and I just hope that there's enough information out there that everyone can vote wisely. Anyways, I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention.
Thank you, Chris, and I will speak at county on those two subjects and try to get clarification for you. Don't know if it'll stop or start anything, but I will ask those questions.
Okay, good.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, I just wanted to, a couple of things, I just wanted to, you know, give actually, and I don't know about Blythe, this is more just in the Wingham ward, after the significant snowfall that we received on Friday and over Saturday, you know, I really have to give kudos to the Public Works in the sense where, you know, I was not envisioning driving down Main Street in Wingham on Saturday and not seeing a snowbank of a significant size on the side of the road leading into businesses. And I would say by 10 o'clock or 10:30 there was not any or very little snowbanks where pedestrians couldn't get into shops or do what they needed to do without being significantly deterred from the snow. And you know what? You know, as much as people sometimes give Public Works a bad name in some instances, I think this is where one of them, they need to be given a thank you and a shout out, because, you know, at the end of the day, you know, they're up when we are not, most likely, in order to do that. And, you know, on those significant fall events, they're away from their families for quite a number of hours. So, you know, I would like to thank them wholeheartedly, and I would like, if Sean, you could take that thank you back to the group, and at least on behalf of myself anyways, I'm not going to speak for the rest of council, but I think that's definitely a positive in my mind.
Well, I didn't hear a complaint at all, so I wanna say thank you. Of course, you filled my driveway in several.
Mine too.
There's no notice of motion. Anyone else? No notice of motion? Oh, so I'm just gonna switch places with Trevor, because I wanna speak to this one. This is my motion.
I'll guard your cookie.
Go ahead, Reeve.
So this is the acute labor shortage that you've heard quite a bit about. I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview on it, and no matter how I try, I'm going to leave somebody or something out, but everybody has worked very hard. There's a lot of volunteers in it. This started at the county level. During the regular county round table meetings that they have both at the north and south end, they invite employers to talk to the employers about what's happening and what they can do for it. Westcast representation there said that after a couple of meetings, they said, we keep talking and talking and talking. We need something done now, or we're not going to be here. Our footprint's going to be a lot smaller in Wingham because we do not have enough people to run the lines. That's all there is to it. We can't keep the lines going, and the lines aren't going to go to Stratford. They're going to go to another country, and once they're gone, they're not going to come back. So this is where the whole thing started. This led to the first stakeholders meeting at the Hot Stove Lounge here in Wingham. There was a good turnout. There was a lot of interest. Myself and Dwayne were here from North Huron. Jamie Heffer was there from Morris Turnberry, as well as the BIAs. There was a staff, employment staff from the county, I guess, and the province. Murray Simpson was there from our economic development. There was staff there from Lisa Thompson. We had Brightspan, Gailey Foods were there, as well as Westcast. So we had a good start, a good conversation. We kind of went on from there, and Westcast made it very clear that they have to move lines to another country if this labor problem keeps going, because it's a company, and Dick Levan is no longer the owner of it. Gailey and Brightspan also, they're not moving, but they're having a difficult time with the employees. That Gailey just put $30 million into a new process, and I've heard they're going to do another $70 million or something. So they can't keep their new line going. So Kinetrix at the other side of Teeswater, they're going to be opening up in March, and they're going to start with 25 employees. And they thought they would build that building. And that's part of the Bruce. They have 6 months to make it work, or they'll lose the contract. They thought they'd come here, pay minimum wages, and get it up and going, and everything would be great. It is rather a large company, but they did locate in Bruce County because the Bruce Power Plant want their people they deal with to be closer. They soon found out that they didn't have to worry about the money, they're just not going to get the people. So they have a problem, they're at the table. I won't go through all the details, I'll just cover a few of them. So the need for the employees, what we did was we can't get them in Huron County, so we went outside of Huron County. We contacted a lot of people in London and Kitchener, we are shipping people in. Some of the things that we learned is that we have no housing or apartments to put them in. So here we are getting the people, and all of a sudden it's like, well, I was cutting my lawn last summer, and these people walk up and go, well, I got a job here, where are you going to put me? And you're the Reeve, aren't you? And I'm like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. So it was a real eye-opening for me. Thanks to Murray putting some quick work to some of his buildings, we do have, I think there's a dozen of them staying around. We do actually also have 2 of them right now staying out at the Wingham Motel, just so we can keep the lines going. So we learned that. We learned we didn't have any place to put them. We learned that a lot of these people are actually coming into our country from India. They don't know the language. They don't have transportation because they don't have a license. So we need transportation so that they could at least get back on the weekends to their family, whether it be Kitchener or London, and visit with them until they got up and going. So the newcomers were made welcome through the meetings, as I said, we had over here. Dwayne and I and Carson were working together, thinking of a way to reach out to upper tier government, exactly what you just happened to be talking about today. They're no longer coming to us, we need to go to them. So while this is moving on, we had more people join us. South Bruce, the mayor of South Bruce, decided to join our little team last time around. The warden from Bruce County sent his regrets. He will be at the next meeting, but he had other obligations over in Walker, and they were announcing new homes over there. We had the warden from Huron County. We've had Leanne's going to help Dwayne, and they're putting together a request for the upper tier governments. I did want to meet with the upper tier governments about 3 months ago, but things kept kind of developing, and the more people you have on your ball team, the less tired you are at the end of the day. And so when we approached the upper tier governments and said that the province and said, well, now not only North Huron wants to talk to you, but we got Bruce County, we got Huron County, all these other people. And they said, well, let's hold off on the meeting because we want more people at the table on our side. That's a good thing. So right now, the CEO, Leon Martin and Dwayne are trying to put together a formula of what we're going to ask them, and of course, it's going to be money and help, because we have to get Hutton Heights going. We have to get stuff for Teeswater. I'll point out too that North Huron and North Huron staff took the initiative to drive hard on this one. There is only one factory involved that is in North Huron. All the rest of them are outside of North Huron, but we had the one that we have to really worry about because it's in our backyard. But again, North Huron reached out, and North Huron has had their neighbors come to them, and we're all working together, and it's been a very pleasant experience. Just going to go through some of my notes here for a second. So what I'm asking for is a motion of support, and the reason I would like a motion of support is that brings it in under our umbrella, and once I have that, then I'm going to request, and I've already talked to the different communities. We want a letter of support from Bruce County, South Bruce, Huron County, ECW, and Morris Turnberry. Again, when we go upstairs, now we've got this cloud, because what we've discovered is we have this little pool, and let's just say from Teeswater to Blythe to Brussels to Lucknow, and we seem to be left out of everything. Nobody seems to know where we are. We need transportation to get those folks in and out into the cities to visit relatives. We need housing. So we've kind of been left out of everything in this little pool. If it goes forward and South Bruce does get the underground depository, they need 1,500 people. Where are we going to put them? Where are we going to put them? And yes, that's a decade away, but I think we're all learning from what we're putting up with right now, what we're going through right now, whether it's Hutton Heights or the Maitland Estates, is you need to think 10 years out. And this is what I'm trying to do with this, is so we're going to put a pathway forward so that 10 years from now or 15 years from now, whether they deviate from the path or not, we, this council, have set that path. And we have the other councils around us understanding the problems, and we're all going to try to work together. So I'm asking for your endorsement for what I put forward. I just want to say, let's do it. Let's keep our jobs. How many times have I heard my kids went to London? Here's one right here. No jobs. Well, let's change that. Maybe 2 generations from now, the grandparents can have the children on their laps because they're here, because we created jobs and we created housing. We started it. So let's approach the upper tier government for assistance to create this. Let's keep making things work. Let's keep working on everything we're working on. Let's build it. Let's build it. But first of all, I'm asking for this council support, and we have a great council, and let's keep moving forward to support this. And then let's go to the other governments, and let's go to those upper tier governments, and let's rattle the chain. Because I will do everything I can to get support for everything we're going to do. And it's early enough in our 4 years that we can pull this off. Thank you.
Okay, so the motion that is being presented by Reeve Bailey is that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby agrees that there is an insufficient labor and affordable or sustainable housing to meet local needs, and further that council agrees that lack of available labor and affordable housing is having a negative economic impact on the township of North Huron. And further, the council is aware of and supports the efforts of all levels of government working together to address the regional labor and affordable/sustainable housing shortage. And further, that council of the township of North Huron hereby supports the use of North Huron's resources to address the labor and affordable/sustainable housing shortage. So that's the motion that I'm going to assume, I'm gonna look to the Reeve to
I'll
make sure
make
that
that
he's
motion.
the motion. So he's moving it. Do I have somebody to second that motion? Councillor Van Hitterson seconds it. Is there any comments or questions? Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. Bernie, I just need clarification. It's very open-ended, the last therefore, about North Huron's resources. Like we hear all the time that our staff is just right to the top. So is there room? Do they have room to work on this as well?
Well, you know what? We have been working together on it for about 5 months, but the staff is sitting right here. Why don't they ask them? Because it wouldn't be fair for me to answer that. Dwayne, are you okay?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, so in terms of staff have been working on this and attending meetings and moving things forward with the committee. So it's not in addition to anything that is currently being completed. And it's not adding to in terms of what I'm currently doing in particular. At this point, I am working with, reached out to, as the Reeve has indicated, the CAO in South Bruce. And that CAO has expressed an interest in terms of being part of and working together, moving it forward. And I've also reached out to the CAO in Morris Turnberry as well. I haven't received a response to that reach out at this point, but I'm hopeful that the three, that the workload that I'm currently carrying, that we can spread that out a little bit between the three CAOs.
I did have a second point.
Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, Bernie, it always, everywhere we're reading, it's always lack of labor and affordable housing, and they seem to be linked. And I drum this already. I just like to see how that and housing, just general housing, because there'll be people coming up from different areas that can afford a $200,000-$300,000 house. So I don't want that aspect of our housing balance to be neglected. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I like what you got.
Yeah.
No issues. I just like to see housing as well.
Yeah, the housing part of it again, as clearly stated in the meeting on Saturday, they have houses from $750,000 right down to $300,000. The developers told us the need is for the working class people, and that's what they're going to concentrate on. We're sitting in a unique situation where it's so much money in Listowel and it's so much money along the lake on the other side of us that this area again, whether it's Teeswater, Blythe, Wingham, Lucknow, Brussels, we are sitting in a situation where we can give those working class people affordable house, a great way of life, and a future. And we can keep our children here, and we can create new jobs and more jobs, because the Bruce is right up there, but for some unknown reason, Huron County has been left out of all and everything that the Bruce is doing. And I've kind of made a commitment to myself that we're going to change all that.
So the feeling is that Maitland Estates will cover the balance.
Yeah, yeah. But Chris, never think that that's the end. Again, I can't state it enough that we cannot afford to do 25 miles of road. We must make up our mind to do this little bit this year, but every year try to do more and set yourself up. And housing is no different. And the daycare already know that they may have to add to the daycare. But we don't ever want to get ourselves in a situation any larger than the 400 homes. But we need to be the council that starts the venture down the road that says, if you continue on this venture, it will be fine. We don't want other people to run into the head of you. I don't think everybody realizes how rough it is. We don't want to be the guys that are sitting here going, when I had spent time with Minister Steve Clark, I may lose 475 jobs. Do you know how that's going to impact on 4,800 people? What's that gonna do, what's that gonna do with our main streets? What are we gonna do? What's that gonna do with our property values? They will go down instead of up. So we need to always be moving forward. We can't stand still anymore. The day of standing still is done. And it will all work out. It's just that we're going for the long shot. This isn't something that we're gonna wave our hands and say, look at everything that happened because we did it, vote for me again. It'll be long after we're off council. But we started it. We're gonna make it work.
Okay.
Councillor Van Henderson?
Yes, I also have some issues with the North Huron resources. Is there any accountability that what resources we use and how much that will be? How can we, is it just unlimited, or is it like an hour a week, or is it, how?
I'd have to hand that back over.
Because it's such a
Yeah.
large area we wanna work together with, I think there should be.
So as Dwayne has said, that we're all in staff from other regions are pulling together
Yeah.
with us. We're all starting to work together, so it's preliminary. Right now, I'm probably putting in, I don't know, a total of 3 hours a month. I'm not sure, I'll let the staff speak to, because I mean, they do a lot of behind the scenes work. But this will be something that, again, as a counselor, you have to understand that you do have to take care of the hospitals, you do have to take care of the roads, you do have to take care of the feeders, and this is just another one you have to take care of. And I think the staff is eager and happy to work on this one, because this is something that's exciting and changing things and moving things forward. But I'll let Dwayne, if you don't mind speaking to that, and I don't wanna put you on the spot, because I have a habit of doing that.
Through you, Chair, I think, so it kind of goes in ebbs and flows depending on what the committee does, but I think on average, I would say 12 to 15 hours a month, in terms of the meetings themselves are about a couple of hours, 2 to 3 hours. And then above that, there's emailing and conversations and all that are taking place with other levels of government. So I would say around 10 to 15 hours a month is currently. So about, I would say about half a day, 3 hours, yeah, about half a day a week at this point.
So we're only talking about staff resources right now?
Oh, just staff. Understand the end game of this is to go
I
upstairs and
understand.
get money.
Yeah.
But no, we're not talking about building roads or anything else, or,
No.
and anything like that would have to come before council.
Okay.
Councillor Heffer?
Yes, through you, Chairman. Yes, when you're talking there, Bailey, you asked that you'd want to have some help with money and help. So what all does that include? That's a pretty open money and help, you said.
I'm talking about going to the provincial and federal governments for money and help. And I'm not gonna pigeonhole it, because I now have Bruce County involved, Huron County involved, we have Morris Turnberry involved, so that is, but we all know and understand one thing, that we don't have the financing. None of us have the financing to build, because it's just the people, the tax dollars are not there to build. We don't have enough money to sustain what we have now, let alone build. So we have to reach out. And as Kevin pointed out, you have to reach out to them. They're not reaching out to us.
Yes. Okay, and again, Dwayne said he is 2 days a month there, and then I think you said Carson was helping, or am I wrong in that? I'm just curious, our resources, they're valuable, because we know we've had a few things put on hold at the last couple meetings, that if we can get around to them. I'd just like to know more about I'd like to see what the goals and responsibilities are, like our workmanship here. I don't want it to be pulled down, you know what I mean?
Again, we've been doing this for 5 months now. I just want to bring it more into a light that I can move things along as far as we have moved them. And Carson and Dwayne can speak to their times.
So Reva, just let me, because I've heard a lot of conversation about resources. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, CAO, so just let me, what I'm hearing is we're bringing more CAOs on board, which is expected to then reduce the resources availability of said yourself as well, and possibly the clerk. if you're currently using, say, 3 hours a week to now, I'm hearing that will be less in the future, is what I'm hearing from staff. I guess my question to the counselors is this initiative, what initiative do we have in the strategic plan that would supersede this initiative right now? Knowing where we are today. Like, I guess, because we're asking a lot about resources, and the strategic plan basically bases out our resource and what our mandate is and where our priorities are. We've had multiple meetings about housing shortages. We live them every day. I guess my question back to council is, because we're talking about resources, where would you put this on the list of priority? Like, if you said, if the CAO and them told you that this was going to be 10 hours a week, and something else was going to go down, but we may or may not get this, I guess my question is that something that would concern you? I'm struggling with the understanding of whether council thinks this is an important initiative, or it's important, but only as important as how much resources we're going to put to it. Councilor Van Heersum?
I think it's a very important initiative, very important, but I just would like to know how much it is. Like, is he putting 3 days a week in this, or just half a day? Or I think this is very important for the future of our community, very important. And we don't see the results right away, but in the near future, we certainly hope that it will be really good. But I was just wondering about those resources, like, what are they and how much? But I think it is important, but like, if it's gonna be like 2 days a week, we are standing for a municipality, so we have to keep an eye on if everything here happens, what we want to do.
So I'm wondering, just let me ask the question, I'm wondering if the fact that the staff have been putting in resources today for the last 5 months that council has been aware of, my question would be is if staff and senior management would provide input to council if that time were to exceed what they've been currently doing over the past 5 months. Because I'm just wondering, is if that's what they've been putting into for the last 5 months, council hasn't had a concern up to the past 5 months. Now we're putting a motion on the table, and then there's a question. So I just want to ask back the question: if it's staff resources, my question is if staff were to come back to council if the time were to exceed what they're currently doing over the past 5 months, would that be sufficient to council? Is my question. Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, through you, Reeve. Don't get us wrong. Like, this is super good. This is super good. We're just very conscientious of our staff, and we know they've been working on it for 5 months or so now. And because this has come up, like, the rubber's hitting the road, okay? Because of this. And we just want to make sure they have the time, and not too many other things get put on the back burner. This is very high on the priority list of our strategic plan. I'm sure we would all agree to that. And we're just making sure that staff can do it. That's all.
Yeah.
It's good. Don't get us wrong. This is great.
I'm just getting clarity for what the discussion has been about resources, because everybody has asked, well, how much, right? Because that's the ended question, is that this doesn't tell you how much. So the staff is advised on how much they've been currently doing over the past 5 months, approximately. The question is, I guess, to you, to Van Hitterson's question, and your question was, how much are we going to see over the next month? And I'm saying is, if they're going to do more, then I think council should be aware of that if you're planning to do more.
Like, for a year, we hear that staff is up to here, okay? And we're all identifying with that, and, we're glad they're working hard. And so we're careful as to what else comes along. So that's all this is caution. And now we have this. Terrific. Can staff carry it on? That's all it is.
Councillor Faulkner, first read.
Through you, Chair. Every aspect of what this motion is covered and what the staff's time has covered is literally in their job description. I would be upset and very adamant that they engage in this process if they weren't. This is what they're hired to do, is to promote this area and bring our needs to higher levels of government. And if you're going to go against a bigger foe, having more people behind your back in a fight is a good thing. They're not going to listen to one guy knocking on the door and you got to listen to me. I got 500 people here. But you come in there, you've got multiple municipalities all with the same process, all dealing with the same thing. You're going to get heard. But as far as economic development, as far as the labor shortages and what you could do as a municipality is literally in their job description. So I don't see it as them adding more time. It is their time they're allocating to portions of their business. What I see is their responsibility.
Reeve Bailey, you had something?
Yeah, I just want to say that you have not seen a report before council on anything because it has never been a council agreed upon, and that's why it's coming before you today. If you decide to vote for this, you will start to get reports on what's going on and how we're handling it, and then you'll have a better understanding. And then when you're talking to anybody in the public, you'll know. But right up till today, this has just been companies that have come to us and said, we have a problem. And I said, well, let's take care of it. But now it's to the point where we need to let council know what's going on because it is council staff, no different than it's going to be Bruce's council staff. So I think it would be a good thing if these reports came to you.
Councillor Faulkner, you have done something else?
Yes, just a question that just came up to my mind for the Reeve. You were talking about the couple of new manufacturing facilities in Bruce that you were talking in a way that they thought they'd get their whole staff at minimum wage. You can't find anybody. Has any of these businesses thought about raising their wages to try and?
I think they're being forced into.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, but it still boils down to the fact there's nobody. That's the problem.
I realize that, but that also falls back on the manufacturer.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's their responsibility to find the worker too. So.
Yeah. Yeah, we can only do so much. They have to play ball with us. And they were the ones, I think they were at Toronto, if I recall, and they just got their eyes open. And then they realized
if they pay the 25, I can get them into a better house.
I think the one thing I did want to bring up is if this initiative didn't come up, another initiative would. So staff saying they've got a lot to do, they're always going to say that because councils are going to provide them. If they didn't have enough, we're going to give them more that they weren't thinking of. So I'm not surprised on if you were to talk to other staff in other municipalities, they're all going to say the same in the sense that there's a lot of initiatives, there's a lot of things to go around, and there is not enough desk space for all of them. It's just not possible in the sense. So, I think it's a great initiative. I think getting the reports, as Reeve Bailey has said, I think that will help as to facilitate some of the discussion at council now, as well as maybe provide suggestions on this council on how to help with the suggestions, on how to help with the initiative. I think, but anything that we can get in front of the upper tier, I think in this point, we're gonna have neighbors that are gonna want to have a chat, and if we can get in front of them, I think it's only in the best interest. That the province of Ontario has its own problems, and we're gonna be not less on those problems than they've had over the next 2 years until an election. So 1 year, 1.5-ish. So I think at the end of the day, the sooner we can get this through that and get to that up, we're gonna have we're gonna have AMOs and we're gonna have Romas again in the next year or so. So I think this is just something that we can tie on to that. So I've got a mover, Councillor Havard?
Yes, through you, Chair. I'd like to see a report of the, as you said, about the hours that are going in, just so we're not gonna get swamped with work. Like if you're saying this is gonna take off, I'd like to see what we're doing now, okay? Is it gonna hang its own, like everybody are gonna be helping in with this? I don't want our municipality, to me, comes in a sense first. I know this is top on it, but there's a lot of things here, like seeing all levels of government working together to try and do this. Are other places going out and doing this too, or is this something new? Like,
You, Bailey?
I have the other municipalities coming to me with what we're doing, number one. Number two, in the report, we can put the hours in that are used. And number three, the most important thing in my life is I have not had a staff member tell me they couldn't do it, wouldn't do it, shouldn't do it. I have not had a staff member say, this is not in my job description. You folks should be proud of the staff we have. I have yet to have a staff member say that they would not do it. They're great people. You guys have no idea how lucky you are to have the staff.
So I think we're all in agreement that this isn't an important initiative. I think if we bring a report to council as to a detailed report as to what has gone on over the past 5 months and times and resources that's been utilized, as well as, you know, when you have the discussion with the CAOs of South Bruce and ACW and those types of things about what the resource level is going to be going forward, and encompass that into a report. I think what I'm hearing is that might alleviate some of the unknowns to council, as well as the public, as to what this initiative could be for the municipality. I'm looking. I'm not hearing anything else.
I don't think it has to be a really big report. It's just like a short thing, like this is what we did and
Summary.
Yeah, a summary.
Yep. Just a capturing report of what
Yeah,
what the initiatives that are going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not that we say no, you can't do that anymore. It's just like.
Yep. Okay, so I do have a mover and a seconder for the motion that's on the floor. All those in favor of that motion? Carried.
Thank you very much. The bylaws now, 12.1. Bylaws, bylaw number 25/2020. A bylaw to establish a policy and procedures for the sale and disposal of the land owned by the Township of North Huron. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin, seconder. I have Paul. All in favor? Questions?
Sorry, I just want, for the purposes of the public, on this particular case, I want it to be very clear about the process. Because there has been a lot of discussion in the public that the Armory's building is for sale. The Armory's building is not for sale. It is declared surplus, which means there's a lot of different options that are still on the table for the council to consider. So the argument still means that council still does not, yes, it's offered for sale, but it doesn't, the council does not have to accept the bid. We do not have to accept it. What I'm saying is there's still options that council has, unless I'm wrong, which I'm not hearing anything, that council is still has the right to determine what they want to do with that building. Meaning, if we want to declare it surplus and tear it down, we can do that still. We haven't determined the final resting place for that building. We have just said it's for surplus. We don't need it in its current state for what we're needing it for right now. So the public is still going to have the purposes of coming to public information. They're still going to have the right to communicate and comment about what they think the municipality should do. I just want to make sure that's clear to the members of the public who might be watching, because that is not what I got from a couple of members of the public after we declared it surplus in the motion last meeting. They said, well, it's for sale. I'm like, well, no, it's potentially for sale, but it's not there yet. We're still got to go through some processes yet. So I just wanted to make that motion or just that discussion clear, at least from what I understand of council's declaration of that being surplus.
Do you want to speak to that, Carson?
Through your worship, yeah, so, and I understand where Deputy Reeves' site's coming from, so maybe I'll just kind of clarify this in maybe a way that seems better. So the property is for sale, it's not guaranteed to be sold, right? So council has provided staff direction to advertise for the sale of the property. That does not, and like Deputy Reeves pointed out, that does not mean we received one offer, property sold, right? So council is going, any offer that's received, council is going to go through the process of reviewing those offers. If there's nothing sufficient, then, whether there is something sufficient but council does not want to go in that direction anymore, council will make the determination of what to do with the property. The only direction that staff have been provided is to go through the advertising process for a potential sale of that building.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Announcements. The next North Huron Economic Development Committee meeting will be held on Thursday, March 12th, 2020, 8 a.m. at the Blythe Community Center. The next budget meeting will be held on Friday, March 13th, 2020 at 9 a.m. in the North Huron Council Chambers. The next regular council meeting will be held Monday, March 16th, 2020 at 6 p.m. here in the chambers. The next North Huron Police Services Board meeting will be held on Tuesday, March 17th here in the chambers. The Court of Revision for the Rental Municipal Drain will be held on Thursday, March 19th, 2020 at 10 a.m. here in the chambers. The next House and Dam Committee meeting will be held on Wednesday, March 25th, 2020 at 4 p.m. here in the chambers. We have no closed session. Confirmation of the bylaw. Do I have a mover?
May I ask something?
Yeah.
It's about the House and Dam committee meeting. Why aren't they waiting a week? Well, it's just a question till the other person is back.
No.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I may.
Yeah.
The reason for the rescheduling was we had a couple of members, or one particular member, that requested if it wasn't going to be advantageous, he had a pre-date that he had to go to, that he wouldn't be able to come to that meeting. That was the only reason why it was changed to the 25th. It wasn't to wait for a member to come back.
No, but there is the member that hasn't been there for like 4 months or something
Oh, the
like
leave of
that.
absence, yes.
Yeah, and I thought it was.
March 31st, wasn't it?
I thought he was coming back in March 28th or the 29th. Is that?
Yeah, I'm not
No?
sure. Well, I'm not sure when he's coming
Well,
back.
Oh, okay.
That was, I don't know the exact date he's coming back. You say, I haven't got a firm
Through
date.
you, your worship,
Yeah,
my
go ahead.
understanding was that he was returning, he's back in the country the end of March, but returning to the committee table in April was my understanding.
Oh, okay.
This change in schedule has nothing to do with that.
Oh, okay. All right.
Go ahead, Chris.
Through you, Reeve, yeah. Kevin, is the leave of absence causing an imbalance in motions, how they end up?
No, the motion that was put forward was very well debated.
Guys, right now we're in announcements, so this is the place for the debate. Okay. Well, we can have that debate another time.
Good one.
Okay. 15.1, bylaw 26-2020 being a bylaw of the Township of North Huron to adopt, confirm, and ratify matters dealt with by the Council of the Township of North Huron. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin, I have a seconder, Chris, all in favor? Carries. Adjournment, that the Council of the Township of North Huron agrees being no other further business before council, the meeting is hereby adjourned at 8:55 p.m. Do I have a mover? I have Anita and I have Chris. All in favor? Carries. Thank you, everyone.
Sorry, Reeve.
No.